The widow stood in the church doorway with a loaded revolver pointed straight at the man who claimed to own her. Every eye in Blackthorn Ridge turned toward Clara Whitmore as she cocked the hammer back with trembling fingers. Behind her, Ryder Holloway, the rancher the entire territory feared, stepped forward without saying a word. The standoff that followed would either destroy them both or prove that two broken people could stand against an entire town determined to break them. But I'm getting ahead of myself. If you want to know how a mail-order bride and a grief-stricken rancher became the most dangerous couple the frontier had ever seen, stick with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Let me take you back to where it all started, the day Clara stepped off that stagecoach and walked straight into hell. The dust never settled in Blackthorn Ridge. It hung in the air like resentment, coating everything. The boardwalks, the storefronts, the faces of people who'd learned to trust nothing except their own bitterness. The town sat on the edge of civilization, 3 days' ride from anything resembling law or mercy. Out here, people survived by keeping their heads down and their suspicions high. Ryder Holloway understood that better than anyone. He stood outside the general store that Thursday afternoon, one boot propped against the hitching post, watching the street with the same dead-eyed stare he'd worn for 8 years. People crossed to the other side when they saw him coming. Mothers pulled their children closer. Even the dogs kept their distance. Not because he was violent, because he was silent. The kind of silence that made men nervous, made them wonder what thoughts moved behind those gray eyes that never quite focused on anything except distance. Ryder had built the largest cattle operation in the territory through sheer stubborn will, working from dawn until his hands bled, speaking only when absolutely necessary. He paid his debts, he kept his word, he never caused trouble, and the town feared him anyway. "Stage is running late," old Chester Blackwood muttered from the doorway of the mercantile, spitting tobacco juice into the street. "Probably got held up at Miller's Creek again." Ryder didn't respond. He rarely did. Chester waited for an answer that wouldn't come, then disappeared back inside, shaking his head. That's how most conversations with Ryder ended, with other people giving up and walking away. The stagecoach arrived 20 minutes later in a cloud of dust and rattling wheels, the horses lathered and exhausted. The driver, a grizzled man named Tompkins, pulled the brake lever hard enough to make the whole rig shudder. "Blackthorn Ridge," he announced to nobody in particular. "End of the line." 3 passengers climbed out. A traveling salesman with a crooked mustache, a ranch hand returning from somewhere else, and a woman. She stepped down carefully, one hand gripping the doorframe, the other clutching a small carpet bag. Her dress was dark blue, modest, dusty from travel. Brown hair pulled back tight. No jewelry except a simple locket around her neck. She looked young, mid-20s maybe, but her eyes carried something older, something used up. Ryder recognized that look. He'd seen it in his own mirror for years. The woman stood on the boardwalk, scanning the street like she was searching for something specific, or someone. Her hands trembled slightly as she set down her bag. "You Ryder Holloway?" Her voice cut through the afternoon heat clear and direct. No hesitation, no polite preamble. Every head on the street turned. Ryder pushed away from the hitching post slowly, studying her. "I am. Clara Whitmore." She didn't extend her hand, didn't smile, just stated her name like she was checking off an item on a list. "I believe we have an arrangement." The whisper started immediately. Arrangement. Mail-order bride. That Holloway actually went through with it. Ryder felt the weight of every stare on the street but kept his eyes on Clara. She stood straight despite obvious exhaustion, meeting his gaze without flinching. Most people couldn't hold eye contact with him for more than a few seconds. She didn't look away. "You got more luggage?" he asked. "One trunk. Tompkins has it." Ryder nodded once, then walked toward the stage without another word. Clara watched him go, her jaw tight, her shoulders squared like she was bracing for impact. Behind her, 2 women stood outside the millinery shop, whispering loud enough to be heard. "Can you believe the nerve?" Answering an advertisement like some kind of... Well, I won't say it out loud. Poor thing probably doesn't know what she's walking into. Clara turned her head slowly, looking directly at them. The women's whispers died in their throats. After a long moment, Clara picked up her carpet bag and followed Ryder toward the wagon. He'd already loaded her trunk into the back, a small, battered thing held together with leather straps and desperate hope. His own wagon was sturdy, but plain, built for work, not comfort. 2 horses stood waiting in harness, their ears flicking at flies. "It's a 2-hour ride to the ranch," Ryder said, not looking at her. "We can stop at the hotel if you need rest first." "I'm fine. Suit yourself." He climbed onto the driver's bench. Clara hesitated only a second before gathering her skirts and pulling herself up beside him. The bench wasn't built for 2 people sitting comfortably. Their shoulders almost touched. Neither moved away. Ryder snapped the reins. The wagon rolled forward through town at a steady pace. Every window seemed to hold a face watching them pass. Every doorway framed someone staring. Clara sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes forward. They were halfway down Main Street when Reverend Pike stepped off the boardwalk directly into their path. Ryder pulled the horses to a stop. Pike was a tall man with silver hair and a voice that carried like judgment itself. He'd presided over every wedding, funeral, and moral crisis in Blackthorn Ridge for 20 years. People listened when he spoke. "Mr. Holloway." Pike's eyes moved from Ryder to Clara and back again. "I believe we should have a conversation before you proceed with whatever this is." "Nothing to discuss," Ryder said flatly. "I disagree. This woman has traveled a long distance under questionable circumstances. The church has certain standards regarding matrimony. Then the church can marry someone else." Ryder's voice stayed level, but something in his tone made Pike take a step back. "We have a legal agreement. That's all you need to know." Clara spoke up quietly. "I'm here of my own free will, Reverend." Pike's expression softened slightly when he looked at her. "Miss, I don't doubt your intentions, but Mr. Holloway has a reputation for isolation, for refusing fellowship with the community. I would be remiss if I didn't ensure you understand what kind of life awaits you out at that ranch." "The kind of life I chose," Clara said, "which is more than many women can say." The words landed hard. Pike opened his mouth to respond, found nothing adequate, and closed it again. After a moment, he stepped aside. Ryder didn't wait for further discussion. He snapped the reins and the wagon rolled forward, leaving the Reverend standing in the street watching them disappear toward the edge of town. Neither of them spoke for the first mile. The landscape opened up into endless plains dotted with scrub brush and twisted trees that looked like they were fighting the wind just to stay vertical. The sun burned overhead without mercy. Heat shimmered off the ground in waves that made the horizon look liquid. Finally, Clara broke the silence. "How many people in town know about our arrangement? All of them by now. And they disapprove. They disapprove of everything I do." Ryder kept his eyes on the trail ahead. "Stopped mattering to me a long time ago." Clara studied his profile. The hard line of his jaw, the permanent tension around his eyes, the way he held himself like he expected attack from any direction. "Why did you place the advertisement?" He didn't answer right away. The wagon bounced over rough ground, wheels creaking. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful, measured. "Needed help running the ranch. Tried hiring help. Nobody stays. Figured a wife might be more permanent." That's honest. Lying takes too much effort. Something that might have been a smile flickered across Clara's face, gone before it fully formed. The advertisement said room, board, and protection in exchange for household management and bookkeeping. That's the agreement. It didn't mention anything about expectations. Ryder understood what she was asking. "You'll have your own room. Lock on the door if you want one. I need a partner to run the ranch, not a—" He stopped, searching for the right word. "Not anything else." Clara's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Good." They rode in silence for another half-mile before Ryder added, almost reluctantly, "Why'd you answer the advertisement?" "Same reason you placed it." Clara watched the landscape roll past. "I needed somewhere safe." "Safe from what?" Her hands tightened in her lap. "The life I left behind." Ryder glanced at her, saw the tension in her jaw, the way she suddenly couldn't meet his eyes. He'd seen that look before, too, on animals that had been cornered once and would do anything to avoid being cornered again. He didn't push for details. The ranch appeared on the horizon just as the sun started its descent toward evening. It wasn't much to look at from a distance. A main house, a barn, several outbuildings scattered across property that stretched as far as the eye could see, fence lines cutting through grassland, a windmill turning slowly against the sky. As they got closer, Clara could see the place needed work. Fences sagging, paint peeling. The kind of slow decay that happens when someone stops caring about anything except survival. "It's larger than I expected," she said. 4,000 acres, most of it leased from the territory. I own the house and the land around it outright. Run about 300 head of cattle, depending on the season. You manage all that alone? Have a ranch hand named Miguel, who comes during roundup and branding. Otherwise, yeah, alone. The word hung in the air between them. Alone. Carrying more weight than it should. Ryder pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house. It was single-story, built from rough-hewn timber and weathered planks. Functional, sturdy. Completely devoid of anything resembling warmth. He climbed down and retrieved Clara's trunk from the back without asking for help. She followed him up the porch steps, noticing the way some boards creaked under her weight, how the front door stuck slightly when Ryder pushed it open. Inside was exactly what she expected. Sparse furniture, bare walls, everything arranged for utility, nothing for comfort. The main room served as kitchen, dining area, and sitting room all at once. A fireplace dominated one wall, cold and swept clean. Dishes stacked neatly beside a hand-pump sink, a table with 2 chairs. Only 2. Like he'd been expecting her. "Your room's through there." Ryder nodded toward a door on the left. "I'm on the other side of the house. Pantry's stocked. Well, water's clean. Outhouse is out back." Clara walked to the doorway he'd indicated and peered inside. A simple room, narrow bed, dresser, washstand. One window looking out toward the barn. No decoration except dust motes floating in afternoon light. It was the nicest room she'd seen in 2 years. "It's perfect," she said quietly. Ryder set her trunk down just inside the doorway. "I'll be in the barn if you need anything. Supper's usually around 7, but I'm not particular about timing." He turned to leave. "Mr. Holloway?" He stopped, looking back at her. "Thank you," Clara said, "for the arrangement, for being honest about expectations, for—" She hesitated. "For giving me somewhere to go." Something flickered across Ryder's face. Surprise, maybe, or discomfort with gratitude. He nodded once, then walked out without another word, the front door closing quietly behind him. Clara stood in the middle of the main room, listening to his footsteps fade across the yard. Then she sat down slowly in one of the chairs at the table and let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for 500 miles. For the first time in months, nobody was watching her. Nobody was controlling when she could eat, sleep, or breathe. The lock worked on her bedroom door, and the man who'd brought her here had asked for nothing except help running a ranch. Clara put her head in her hands and cried silently for 10 minutes straight, shaking with relief she hadn't known her body still contained. The first week passed in careful silence. Clara woke before dawn, dressed quickly, and started coffee before Ryder came in from early chores. He'd nod once, pour himself a cup, and disappear back outside. She'd make breakfast, simple things, eggs and bacon when they had it, biscuits and gravy when they didn't, and leave his portion on the table. He'd eat standing up, wash his plate, and leave again. They spoke maybe 20 words to each other per day. But Clara noticed things. He always hung his hat on the same peg by the door. He drank his coffee black, 3 cups before noon. His right shoulder bothered him, though he tried to hide it. He worked himself to exhaustion every single day, like he was trying to outrun something that lived in his own head. And he never, not once, asked her about the life she'd left behind. On the 8th day, Clara decided to explore the ranch properly. She'd spent the previous week cleaning the house room by room, discovering years of accumulated neglect. Now she needed to understand the operation she'd agreed to help manage. The barn was bigger than the house, well-maintained despite its weathered appearance. Tools organized on walls. Tack room neat. 6 horses in stalls, all looking healthy and well-fed. This was where Ryder actually spent his attention, on the animals and equipment that kept the ranch running. She found him in one of the far stalls, treating a gash on a roan mare's flank. "She catch it on barbed wire?" Clara asked from the doorway. Ryder didn't look up from his work. "Probably. Fence needs replacing in the north pasture. Been putting it off." "I saw the ledger in the house. You haven't recorded any expenses or income in 6 months." "Haven't had time." "That's what you hired me for." He glanced at her then, something unreadable in his expression. "Hired is a strong word. What would you call it?" A mutually beneficial arrangement between two people with nowhere else to go. The honesty was brutal and refreshing at the same time. Clara leaned against the stall door watching him work. His hands moved efficiently despite their size, gentle with the horse, precise with the medical supplies. You're better at this than you let on. At what? Everything. The ranch runs smoothly despite you claiming you barely manage. The animals are healthy. The books are just disorganized, not inaccurate. You've been doing the work of 3 people and pretending it's barely enough. Ryder finished bandaging the mare's injury before responding. Doesn't matter how well I run it if nobody respects it. Why don't they? He looked at her directly for the first time all week. Because 8 years ago I lost my wife and daughter to fever. Buried them both on a Tuesday. The town came to the funeral, said all the right things, and expected me to grieve properly, politely, quietly. Clara stayed silent, letting him talk. But I didn't grieve right, Ryder continued, his voice flat. I worked instead. Stopped going to church. Stopped pretending I gave a damn about their opinions or their sympathy. Built this ranch into something that should matter, but all they see is the man who refused to heal the way they wanted. So they punish you for it. Every day. Clara understood that better than he knew. Where I come from, they punish you for trying to leave. Out here, they punish you for refusing to perform grief like it's a theatrical production. Different places. Same cruelty. Ryder studied her carefully. You ever going to tell me what you're running from? Maybe, when I'm sure you won't send me back. Wouldn't do that. You say that now, but people always have limits, lines they won't cross, things they can't forgive. I buried my family and the town called me heartless. I don't have many lines left to draw. They looked at each other across the dim barn interior, 2 damaged people trying to figure out if trust was even possible anymore. I was engaged, Clara said finally, to a man named Victor Hale. Wealthy, respected. Every door in Boston opened for him. She paused, her voice going quieter. Behind those doors, he was different, controlling, vicious when things didn't go his way. By the time I understood who he really was, I'd already signed contracts, accepted his ring, announced our engagement to everyone who mattered. Ryder's jaw tightened. So you ran. 3 weeks before the wedding. Took everything I could carry and bought a ticket west. Clara's hands trembled slightly. He'll look for me. Men like Victor don't accept being embarrassed, and I humiliated him in front of everyone he cares about. He finds you out here, he'll have to go through me first. The words came out simple and direct. Not a promise, not a romantic gesture, just a statement of fact delivered in that flat, emotionless tone Ryder used for everything. But Clara felt something shift in her chest anyway. Why would you do that, she asked. We barely know each other. You answered my advertisement honestly. You've worked hard every day since you arrived. You don't ask questions I'm not ready to answer. Ryder shrugged. That's more than most people have given me in 8 years. Figure I owe you the same respect. Respect. Not affection. Not attraction. Just basic human respect. It was the most valuable thing anyone had offered Clara in longer than she could remember. I can have the ledgers updated by end of week, she said, changing the subject before emotion could complicate things. And I noticed the pantry inventory system is a mess. I'll reorganize that too. Appreciate it. We'll need to go into town for supplies soon. Ryder's expression darkened. I go into town once a month, usually alone. I'm here now. Might as well get used to being seen together. Clara met his eyes steadily. Unless you're ashamed of the arrangement. Ashamed? He shook his head. No, but the town won't be kind to you. They weren't kind before you arrived. They'll be worse now. I survived Victor Hale and everything he did to me. I think I can handle some gossip from strangers. Ryder almost smiled. Almost. You're tougher than you look. Most people are. We just hide it better than you do. This time he did smile. Barely, and only for a second. But it changed his entire face. Made him look younger. Less like weathered stone and more like an actual human being. They went into town together on Saturday. The reaction was immediate. Conversation stopped when the wagon rolled down Main Street. Women clustered in doorways whispering. Men stood outside the saloon watching with hard eyes. Reverend Pike emerged from the church and followed their progress like he was cataloging evidence for Judgment Day. Ryder pulled up in front of the general store and climbed down without acknowledging anyone. Clara followed, her head high, refusing to shrink under the weight of all those stares. Inside, the store went completely silent. Chester Blackwood stood behind the counter, his expression somewhere between surprise and disapproval. Two women near the fabric section stopped talking mid-sentence. "Morning, Chester," Ryder said evenly. "Need to settle my account and place an order." Chester's eyes moved to Clara, then back to Ryder. "This the woman you brought in on the stage?" "Clara Whitmore. My fiancée." The word hung in the air like a challenge. Clara stepped forward calmly. "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Blackwood." Chester didn't take her offered hand. Well, I suppose congratulations are in order." "No need for congratulations, just need supplies." Ryder pulled a list from his pocket and set it on the counter. "Can you have this ready by end of day?" "Most of it. Might have to order some items from the distributor." "That's fine. Send word when it's ready." One of the women near the fabric, a thin, sharp-faced woman named Mrs. Cordelia Hayes, couldn't stay quiet any longer. "Excuse me, but isn't anyone going to acknowledge how irregular this is?" Ryder turned slowly to face her. "Irregular." "Yes. A woman arriving from who knows where, claiming to be engaged to a man she's never met." "We've been corresponding for 4 months," Clara interjected calmly. "I know exactly who I agreed to marry." "Corresponding?" Mrs. Hayes made it sound like a crime. "How very modern of you both." "Modern beats lonely," Clara said, "though I understand that might be a difficult concept for some people to grasp." The barb landed perfectly. Mrs. Hayes's face flushed red. Her companion, another society woman whose name Clara didn't know, gasped audibly. Chester cleared his throat loudly. "I'll have your order ready by 5, Ryder." "Appreciate it." They left the store in tense silence. Outside, a small crowd had gathered on the boardwalk, not blocking their path exactly, but making it clear they'd been the topic of intense discussion. Ryder walked straight through them without a word, Clara at his side. "That's her," someone whispered. "Can't believe he actually went through with it." "Poor girl probably doesn't know what she's getting into." Clara stopped walking abruptly and turned to face the crowd. Ryder stopped too, watching her. "I know exactly what I'm getting into," Clara announced clearly, "and I'd appreciate if the people of Blackthorn Ridge spent less time worrying about my business and more time minding their own." Silence. Then Ryder did something that surprised everyone, including Clara. He took her arm gently, not possessively, just supportively, and guided her toward the wagon. "That's my fiancée," he said to nobody in particular, "and she's under my protection. Anybody got a problem with that, they can take it up with me directly." They climbed onto the wagon and left town without looking back. A mile down the trail, Clara started laughing. Not polite laughter. Real, exhausted, slightly hysterical laughter that came from somewhere deep in her chest. Ryder glanced at her, concerned. "You all right?" "Did you see their faces?" Clara managed between laughs. "Mrs. Hayes looked like she'd swallowed a wasp." "She usually does." "And the way everyone just stared when you called me your fiancé, like you'd announced we were planning to rob the bank together." "Give them time. They'll find something else to gossip about." "No, they won't. We're too interesting." Clara wiped her eyes, the laughter fading into something softer. "Thank you for standing beside me in there. Part of the arrangement." "No, it isn't. The arrangement was room and board and protection. You didn't have to make a public declaration like that." Ryder kept his eyes on the trail. "You stood up to Mrs. Hayes. Figured the least I could do was back you up." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the tension from town slowly bleeding away into prairie wind and open sky. "When is the wedding supposed to happen?" Clara asked eventually. "Whenever you're ready, or never, if you change your mind." "I won't change my mind. I just need to know what the timeline is." Ryder considered. "A month, maybe. Gives you time to be sure. Gives me time to get the house in better shape." "The house is fine. It's a mess. It's better than where I was. That makes it fine." He looked at her then, really looked at her, trying to understand what kind of hell she'd escaped that made his neglected ranch house seem like paradise. But he didn't ask, and she didn't tell. The days settled into a pattern. Clara took over the bookkeeping completely, discovering that Ryder had been undercharging for cattle sales and overpaying for supplies because he simply didn't have time to negotiate properly. She renegotiated their feed contract, saving 20%. She organized the inventory system so they could track what actually needed replacing instead of guessing. She wrote letters to potential buyers in Kansas City and Denver, expanding their market. The ranch started making actual money instead of barely breaking even. Ryder noticed, but he said nothing. Just left the ledgers where Clara could find them and trusted her to handle things he'd been struggling with alone for years. In return, Clara learned how the ranch actually operated. She watched Ryder work cattle, studied how he assessed which animals to sell and which to keep for breeding. She learned to read weather patterns, to predict when storms were coming based on how the horses behaved. She started helping with evening chores, feeding chickens and collecting eggs, checking fence lines closest to the house. They became a team without ever formally deciding to be one. But the town didn't forget about them. 3 weeks after their first trip to town, Clara rode in alone to pick up supplies Chester had ordered. Ryder had wanted to go with her, but she'd insisted. She couldn't hide on the ranch forever. The moment she walked into the general store, 3 women clustered near the counter went silent. Clara ignored them and approached Chester directly. "I'm here for the Holloway order." "Right. I'll get it from the back." While he disappeared into the storeroom, one of the women, a younger one Clara didn't recognize, spoke up tentatively. "Miss Whitmore? I'm Sarah Chen. I wanted to apologize for how people treated you last time." Clara turned, surprised. "That's kind of you." "It wasn't right. The way Mrs. Hayes spoke to you. The way everyone stared." Sarah glanced at her companions nervously. "Not everyone in town feels that way. Just most of them." "Well, yes, but some of us understand that people come west for all kinds of reasons, and none of those reasons are our business." It was a small kindness, but Clara felt it anyway. "Thank you. I appreciate that more than you know." The other 2 women said nothing, but at least they didn't look actively hostile anymore. Chester returned with 3 crates of supplies. "That'll be $22 even." Clara counted out the exact amount, noticing how Chester's eyebrows rose slightly. Most people in town ran accounts they settled monthly. She was paying cash. "Ryder mentioned you've been helping with the books," Chester said carefully. "That true?" "It is. He undercharged me on cattle last month, by a fair amount." "I know. I corrected the invoice and sent you an updated bill." Chester actually smiled. "Got it yesterday. Paid it this morning. Man's been leaving money on the table for years, but he's too proud to ask for help." "He's not too proud. He's too tired." Clara picked up the smallest crate. "And now he doesn't have to do everything alone." She carried the supplies out to the wagon, loaded them carefully, and rode back to the ranch without incident. But when she arrived, she found Ryder waiting on the porch with a tense expression. "What happened?" she asked immediately. "Nothing, just—" He stood abruptly. "Got a letter while you were gone, from your friend Sarah Chen." Clara's heart dropped. "I don't know anyone named—" "It's not actually from Sarah. It's from someone named Victor Hale." The world tilted sideways. Clara sat down heavily on the porch steps, her face going pale. How did he find me?" Ryder handed her the envelope. It was expensive paper, cream-colored, sealed with red wax. Clara's hands shook as she opened it. The letter inside was written in Victor's precise, elegant handwriting. "My dearest Clara, I've been terribly worried about you since your sudden departure. Your family is beside themselves with concern. I know you left because wedding preparations overwhelmed you, perfectly understandable for someone of your sensitive nature. But you must understand that running away solved nothing. I've made arrangements to come collect you personally. I should arrive in Blackthorn Ridge within the week. I trust you'll be ready to return home with me, where you belong. Please don't make this more difficult than necessary. I've already forgiven your momentary lapse in judgment. All will be forgotten once we're married. Yours eternally, Victor." Clara read it twice, then let it flutter to the ground like something contaminated. Ryder picked it up, read it himself, his jaw tightening with each line. "He thinks you're just going to go with him. That's how Victor thinks. He doesn't consider the possibility that I might actually want something different." Clara's voice was hollow. "He'll come here. He'll try to make it look civilized, like he's just a concerned fiancé retrieving his confused bride. And everyone in town will believe him because he's charming and wealthy and knows exactly how to manipulate people. You're not going anywhere. You don't understand. Victor doesn't take no for an answer. Ever. If he has to drag me back to Boston by force, he won't." The certainty in Ryder's voice made Clara look up. "We move up the wedding," Ryder said. This week, before he arrives. If you're married to me legally, he has no claim on you. That's not how men like Victor see the world. Legal marriage won't stop him. It'll just make him angrier. Then he can be angry. Ryder's expression was harder than Clara had ever seen it. But he'll be angry at me, not you. And I'm a lot harder to push around than you think. Clara wanted to believe him, but she'd seen what Victor could do when someone stood between him and something he considered his property. And that's exactly what she was to him, property that had escaped. Ryder, you don't know what you're offering. Victor is dangerous, not just physically, but socially, politically. He can destroy reputations, ruin businesses, make people disappear into poverty. If you stand against him, Clara. Ryder crouched in front of her, looking directly into her eyes. I've spent 8 years not caring about anything except keeping this ranch running. My reputation is already ruined. I have no political connections to lose, and I sure as hell am not going to let some Boston society man walk into my territory and take something that isn't his. I'm not yours either. No. But you're under my protection. That's the agreement, and I keep my agreements. Clara felt tears threatening but forced them back. Why are you doing this? Because you deserve to choose your own life, and because he hesitated, something vulnerable flickering across his face. Because maybe I'm tired of being alone. The admission hung between them, raw and honest. Clara reached out slowly and took his hand. His calluses were rough against her palm, real, solid, everything Victor's polished softness had never been. Okay, she whispered. We move up the wedding. Ryder squeezed her hand once, then stood. I'll ride into town tomorrow and talk to Reverend Pike. Set it for Saturday, if he'll agree. He won't want to. He thinks we're making a terrible mistake. He can think whatever he wants, but he'll perform the ceremony. Clara stood slowly, feeling like she was standing on the edge of a cliff with no way back. And if Victor arrives before Saturday, then he arrives, and I deal with it. How? Ryder's smile was cold and humorless. However necessary. Listen, Reverend Pike did not agree easily. Ryder rode into town Tuesday morning and found the Reverend in his church, reviewing Sunday's sermon notes. The old man looked up when Ryder entered, surprise and wariness crossing his face. Mr. Holloway, this is unexpected. Need to schedule a wedding, this Saturday, early morning if possible. Pike set down his pen carefully. That's quite rushed. It is. May I ask why the sudden urgency? Personal reasons. I see. Pike folded his hands on his desk. Mr. Holloway, I've known you for many years. I presided over Emma and Catherine's funeral. I've watched you isolate yourself from this community, from any semblance of fellowship or faith. And now you want me to marry you to a woman you've known for less than a month? Yes. That's it? Just yes? No explanation? No acknowledgement that this entire situation is highly irregular? Ryder met Pike's eyes steadily. Clara Whitmore is in danger. From someone back east. Marrying me protects her legally. That's all the explanation you need. Pike's expression shifted slightly. What kind of danger? The kind that doesn't take no for an answer. The Reverend was quiet for a long moment, studying Ryder's face. You care about her. It wasn't a question. I respect her, Ryder said. That's more important. Is it? Because marriage requires more than respect, Mr. Holloway. It requires... We're clear on what it requires. And we're both going into this with our eyes open. Ryder's voice was flat but firm. Now, are you going to perform the ceremony? Or do I need to ride to the next county and find someone who will? Pike sighed heavily. Saturday morning, 6 o'clock, before the town wakes up enough to make it a spectacle. Appreciated. Mr. Holloway, Pike called as Ryder turned to leave. I hope you know what you're doing. I don't. But I'm doing it anyway. He left the church feeling like he'd just signed a contract in blood. The news spread through Blackthorn Ridge faster than wildfire. By Wednesday afternoon, everyone knew about the rushed wedding. Speculation ran wild. Some said Clara was pregnant. Others claimed Ryder had threatened her into it. A few whispered that it was all some elaborate scheme involving inheritance or land rights. Nobody guessed the truth. Thursday morning, a stranger rode into town. He was everything Ryder wasn't. Polished, well-dressed, handsome in a way that looked practiced. He wore an expensive suit despite the frontier dust, rode a horse that probably cost more than most people's annual income, and carried himself with the absolute certainty of someone who'd never been told no in his entire life. Victor Hale had arrived. He went straight to the hotel, took their best room, and made it known he was looking for Clara Whitmore. The news reached the ranch by Thursday afternoon via Miguel, who'd been in town buying supplies. "There's a man asking about Senorita Clara," he told Ryder urgently. "Rich man, Boston accent, says he's her fiancé." Ryder was shoeing a horse in the barn. He set down his tools carefully, too carefully. "What's he saying?" "That she ran away confused, that he's here to take her home, that he's worried about her safety." Miguel hesitated. "People are listening, Patron. He's very convincing." "I bet he is." Clara appeared in the barn doorway, her face pale. "He's here." "I know." "What do we do?" Ryder walked over to her slowly. "We do nothing. You stay here. I'll go to town and make it clear you're not leaving." "He won't listen to you." "Then I'll make him listen." "Ryder, you don't understand. Victor doesn't respond to threats or intimidation. He'll smile and be charming and make you look like the unreasonable one. That's what he does. He twists everything until everyone believes his version of reality." Ryder studied her carefully. "You're scared." "Of course I'm scared. Victor Hale is the most dangerous person I've ever met, and he's in the same town as us right now." "Then we move the wedding up, tomorrow morning instead of Saturday." "Pike won't." "Pike will do it, and by tomorrow afternoon, you'll be legally married to me. Victor won't have a claim anymore." Clara wrapped her arms around herself. "Legal marriage won't stop him. Maybe not, but it'll force him to make his next move in the open instead of hiding behind propriety." Ryder picked up his hat from the workbench. "Miguel, you stay here with Clara. Don't let anyone onto the property except me. Anyone shows up, you come get me immediately." "Sí, Patron." Ryder turned back to Clara. "You trust me?" She wanted to say no. Trust had been beaten out of her slowly and methodically over 2 years. But looking at Ryder's steady gray eyes, his absolute certainty, his stubborn refusal to back down, "Yes," she whispered, "I trust you." He nodded once, then left for town. Victor Hale was holding court in the hotel restaurant when Ryder arrived. 4 townspeople sat around him listening to his stories about Boston society, about Clara's prominent family, about the tragic misunderstanding that had led to her flight west. He painted himself as the devoted fiancé, concerned and forgiving. Clara became the confused woman who'd made a terrible mistake in a moment of wedding anxiety. People were eating it up. Ryder walked straight to the table without preamble. "Victor Hale." The conversation died instantly. Victor looked up with practiced surprise, then stood smoothly, extending his hand. "You must be Mr. Holloway. I've heard quite a bit about you. Victor Hale, Clara's fiancé." Ryder didn't take the offered hand. "Former fiancé." Victor's smile never wavered, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "I understand you've been very kind to Clara during her confusion. I want you to know how much I appreciate you keeping her safe until I could arrive. She's not confused. She's escaping you." The words landed like stones. Victor's smile tightened. "I think you've misunderstood the situation. I understand perfectly. You're an abusive piece of shit who thinks money and charm entitle you to own another person, and you came here thinking you could manipulate a frontier town into handing her back." The restaurant went completely silent. Victor's mask finally cracked, revealing something sharp and vicious underneath. "Be very careful how you speak to me, Mr. Holloway. I have resources you can't imagine, connections that reach far beyond this provincial little town. If you stand between me and Clara, I'm marrying her tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock. You're not invited." Victor actually laughed. "You think a rushed ceremony will stop me? I'll have it annulled within a week. I'll have you arrested for kidnapping. I'll destroy whatever pathetic little operation you're running out here. And then I'll take Clara home where she belongs." "Try it." The 2 men stared at each other across the table. Victor seeing a rough frontier rancher he could easily outmaneuver. Ryder seeing a predator who'd never been hit hard enough to stay down. "You have no idea what you're interfering with," Victor said quietly, all pretense of charm gone. "Clara is mine. The engagement contracts are signed. Her family expects this marriage. Society expects it. and I always get what I want. Not this time. Ryder turned and walked out, leaving Victor standing in the restaurant with his carefully constructed image crumbling around him. But as he rode back to the ranch, Ryder felt cold certainty settling in his chest. This wasn't over. Victor Hale hadn't come all the way from Boston just to be turned away by a wedding ceremony. He'd come to take Clara back, and he'd do whatever it took to make that happen. Ryder got back to the ranch just as the sun started dropping toward the horizon. Miguel stood near the barn with a rifle across his arms, relaxed but ready. Clara watched from the porch, her posture rigid with tension that didn't ease even when Ryder dismounted. "He's at the hotel," Ryder said without preamble. "Making friends, telling stories about how concerned he is, how confused you are." Clara's laugh was brittle. "Of course he is. That's Victor's specialty, making himself the hero of every story. Town's listening too. Mrs. Hayes practically had hearts in her eyes." Ryder walked up the porch steps, his boots heavy on the wood. "But I made our position clear. We're getting married tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock at the church." "You told him that?" To his face? Seemed important, he knew. "What did he say?" Ryder's expression went dark. "That he'd have it annulled within a week. That he'd have me arrested for kidnapping. That he always gets what he wants." Clara sat down slowly on the porch railing, her face pale. "He meant it. Every word. Victor doesn't make threats he can't follow through on." "Neither do I." They looked at each other in the fading light, both understanding that whatever happened next would change everything. The careful arrangement they'd built, the tentative partnership, the quiet respect, all of it was about to be tested by a man who viewed other people as obstacles to be removed. Miguel cleared his throat from near the barn. "Patron, you want me to stay tonight, keep watch?" Ryder considered, then nodded. "Take the spare room in the barn. Anyone comes up the road after dark, fire a warning shot." "See." Miguel headed toward the barn, leaving them alone. Clara wrapped her arms around herself despite the warm evening. "I'm sorry for bringing this into your life. You didn't sign up for—" "Yes, I did." Ryder's voice was flat but certain. "The advertisement said protection. This is what protection looks like when someone needs it. This is different. This is dangerous. Victor has money and lawyers, and I have a ranch in the middle of territory he doesn't understand, surrounded by people who trust actions over words. Let him try his legal tricks out here. See how far they get him." Clara wanted to believe him, but she'd watched Victor manipulate judges, police officers, politicians, men who should have known better but couldn't resist his charm and his checkbook. "You should know something," she said quietly. "Victor isn't just controlling. He's violent. Not in public, never where anyone can see. But behind closed doors—" She stopped, her throat tight. "The first time he hit me, I thought it was an accident. He apologized so beautifully, sent flowers, cried. Said he'd been under terrible stress at work, and I just happened to say the wrong thing at the wrong time." Ryder's jaw clenched, but he stayed silent, letting her talk. "The second time, he blamed the wine. The third time, my tone of voice. By the 10th time, he stopped bothering with excuses." Clara's voice went hollow. "He broke 2 of my ribs once because I laughed at another man's joke at a dinner party. Told the doctor I'd fallen downstairs. Everyone believed him because Victor Hale would never hurt anyone. He's too respectable, too refined. Where'd he hit you that people wouldn't see?" The question was asked in that same flat tone, but Clara heard something underneath it, something cold and dangerous. "Anywhere clothes would cover, ribs, back, arms, upper thighs. He was very careful about it." She met Ryder's eyes. "I'm telling you this so you understand what kind of man you're dealing with. Victor doesn't fight fair. He doesn't fight honorably. He fights to win, and he doesn't care who gets destroyed in the process." "Good to know." "That's it? Good to know? What else you want me to say? That I'm shocked? That I'll think less of you for staying as long as you did?" Ryder shook his head. "People do what they need to do to survive. You survived until you could run. That took more strength than most people ever find." Clara felt something crack in her chest. Not breaking, releasing, like pressure she'd been holding for years finally finding a way out. "The wedding tomorrow," she said, her voice steadier. "It won't stop him. You know that, right? Victor will find a way to challenge it or undermine it or let him try. I'll be ready." "How? How do you prepare for someone like Victor?" Ryder was quiet for a moment, looking out across the darkening plains. I spent 8 years not caring whether I lived or died. Just going through motions because stopping meant admitting Emma and Catherine were really gone. Then you showed up, and for the first time since I buried them, I had something worth protecting again. Clara's breath caught. So yeah, Ryder continued, I'll fight Victor Hale. And I'll win. Not because I'm stronger or smarter or better, but because I've got a reason to fight now, and he's just got pride. The words hung between them in the twilight. Not a declaration of love, neither of them was ready for that, but an acknowledgement that something had shifted, that this stopped being just an arrangement the moment Victor's letter arrived. We should eat something, Clara said finally, needing to move before emotion overwhelmed her. Going to be a long day tomorrow. Yeah, probably should. They went inside together, and for the first time since Clara arrived, they cooked a meal side by side instead of separately. Nothing fancy, fried potatoes, bacon, eggs, but they worked in the small kitchen without getting in each other's way, passing ingredients without asking, finding a rhythm that felt almost natural. They ate at the table, not in shifts like usual, actually sitting across from each other. When's the last time you had a real conversation? Clara asked suddenly. Not business. Not about the ranch. Just talking. Ryder thought about it. 8 years? Give or take? That's a long time to be silent. Seemed safer than saying something that mattered. Clara set down her fork. What would you say? If you weren't worried about it mattering. He looked at her for a long moment. That I'm tired of being afraid of caring about things. That this ranch is just land and cattle, unless there's a reason to keep it running. That maybe, he stopped, searching for words, that maybe you showing up was the first lucky thing to happen to me in a decade. Clara felt tears threatening, but refused to let them fall. I don't feel very lucky. You're alive. You got out. That's luckier than you think. I got out and ran straight to a stranger who advertised for a wife in the newspaper. That's not luck. That's desperation. Maybe. But you picked the right stranger. Ryder's voice softened slightly. I won't hit you, Clara. Ever. No matter how angry I get, no matter what you say or do. That's not who I am. How do I know that? You don't. Not yet. But you will. Because I'll prove it every day until you believe it. It was the most he'd said at once since she arrived, and every word landed like a promise. They finished eating in silence that felt comfortable instead of tense. Clara washed dishes while Ryder dried. Small domestic rhythms that felt impossibly significant given what tomorrow would bring. Around 9 o'clock, Clara excused herself to her room. She tried to sleep but couldn't. Every sound outside made her tense. Was it Victor? Was it someone coming to drag her back? Was it the wind? Around midnight, she gave up and walked into the main room, found Ryder sitting at the table cleaning his rifle by lamplight. Can't sleep either? She asked. Don't sleep much in general. He didn't look up from his work. Too many years alone. Got used to being alert. Clara sat down across from him, watching his hands move with practiced efficiency. Are you scared about tomorrow? No? Liar. That made him glance up. Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. All right, maybe a little. Not of Victor. Of failing you. You won't. You don't know that. No. But I'm choosing to believe it anyway. Clara reached across the table, hesitated, then put her hand over his. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever Victor does, I want you to know, I'm grateful. For all of it. The arrangement, the protection, the honesty. You gave me something I haven't had in years. What's that? A choice. Ryder turned his hand over, palm up, letting her hand rest in his. His calluses were rough against her skin. Real, solid. They sat like that for several minutes, not speaking, just existing in the same space without fear or expectation. Finally, Clara stood. Try to get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be hell. Yeah, probably will be. She went back to her room, and this time, sleep came easier. Morning arrived cold and gray. Clara woke to the sound of Miguel already working in the yard. She dressed carefully in the nicest dress she owned, dark green, simple, nothing fancy. This wasn't a celebration. This was a tactical maneuver. Ryder was already up, clean-shaven for the first time since she'd met him. He wore his best shirt, still worn at the elbows, but clean and pressed. He looked uncomfortable, like the clothes didn't quite fit right anymore. You look nice, Clara said. Feel ridiculous. Well, you don't look ridiculous. Miguel appeared in the doorway. The wagon's ready, Patron. I'll ride ahead. Make sure everything's clear at the church. Appreciate it. They rode into town as the sun was just starting to lighten the eastern sky. Blackthorn Ridge looked almost peaceful in the early morning, before people woke up to start their daily routines of judgment and gossip. The church sat at the north end of Main Street, a simple wooden building with a cross on top and windows that needed washing. Reverend Pike stood on the steps waiting, his expression somewhere between resigned and concerned. Mr. Holloway, Miss Whitmore. He nodded to each of them. I see you're determined to go through with this. We are, Clara said before Ryder could respond. Very well. Though I should mention, Mr. Hale came to see me last night. He made some very serious allegations about coercion and undue influence. Ryder's expression went cold. What did you tell him? That I would perform the ceremony as planned unless Miss Whitmore herself told me she was being forced. Pike looked directly at Clara. Are you being forced into this marriage? No. Are you of sound mind and acting of your own free will? Yes. Then we'll proceed, though I suspect this won't be the end of Mr. Hale's objections. They went inside. The church was empty except for Miguel, who stood near the back acting as witness. Morning light filtered through dusty windows, casting everything in gray and gold. Pike took his position at the front. Ryder and Clara stood before him, not touching, both tense. Before we begin, Pike said quietly, I want to make something clear. Marriage is not a legal shield to hide behind. It's a covenant between two people who commit to building a life together. If this is just a strategy to avoid Mr. Hale, it started that way, Clara interrupted. But it's not just that anymore. Pike's eyebrows rose. No? No. She glanced at Ryder, found him already looking at her. We've become partners. Not in the romantic sense necessarily, but in every other way that matters, and I trust him more than I've trusted anyone in years. Mr. Holloway? Ryder took a slow breath. She's right. Started as an arrangement. Became something else. Don't have words for what exactly, but I know I'm not letting Victor Hale take her anywhere. Pike studied them both for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly and opened his prayer book. Very well. Let's begin. The ceremony was brief, no frills, no flowery language. Pike asked the essential questions. They gave the essential answers. When it came time for rings, Ryder produced a simple silver band that had belonged to his mother. It's not fancy, he said as he slid it onto Clara's finger, but it's real. Clara looked down at the ring, feeling its weight. It's perfect. Pike pronounced them married just as the church door banged open. Victor Hale stood in the entrance, impeccably dressed, despite the early hour, flanked by two rough-looking men Clara didn't recognize. His expression was cold fury barely contained behind a veneer of civilized outrage. I'm afraid I must object to these proceedings, Victor announced, his voice carrying through the church like he was performing for an audience. This woman is already engaged to me. This ceremony is invalid. Pike straightened. Mr. Hale, the ceremony is complete. They are legally married. Under false pretenses. Clara is not of sound mind. She fled Boston in a state of mental distress and has been manipulated by this man into a hasty marriage. Victor's eyes fixed on Clara with possessive intensity. Clara, darling, it's all right. I forgive you for this confusion. Come with me now and we'll straighten everything out. Clara felt ice in her stomach but forced herself to stay calm. I'm not confused, Victor, and I'm not going anywhere with you. Don't be absurd. You're clearly unwell. I'm perfectly well. And I just married Ryder Holloway of my own free will. The engagement to you was broken the moment I left Boston. Victor's mask cracked slightly. We had a contract, which I voided when you put your hands on me for the last time. Silence fell over the church. Victor recovered quickly, his expression shifting to wounded innocence. I have no idea what you're referring to. I never laid a hand on you except in affection. If you're making accusations like this, it only proves how unstable you've become. She's not unstable, Ryder said quietly. She's free, and she's staying that way. Victor's attention shifted to Ryder, and for the first time Clara saw genuine hatred in his eyes. You have no idea what you've interfered with. I will have this marriage annulled. I will have you arrested for kidnapping and manipulation, and I will take Clara home where she belongs. She's home already. The two men stared at each other across the church. Miguel shifted position near the back, his hand resting casually on his gun belt. The two men Victor had brought looked uncertain, like they'd expected this to be easier. Pike cleared his throat. Gentlemen, this is a house of worship. Whatever disputes you have, they don't belong here. Mr. and Mrs. Holloway are legally married. If you have objections, Mr. Hale, you can take them to a court of law. Oh, I intend to. Victor's voice was pure venom now. And when I'm done, this pathetic rancher will wish he'd never seen Clara's face. He turned and walked out, his hired men following. The door slammed behind them with enough force to rattle the windows. Clara realized she'd been holding her breath. She let it out slowly, her hand shaking. Ryder touched her elbow gently. You all right? No, but I will be. Pike closed his prayer book with a heavy sigh. I hope you two know what you're doing. Victor Hale strikes me as a man who doesn't lose gracefully. He doesn't lose at all, Clara said. That's the problem. They left the church together, husband and wife now, walking into morning light that felt more ominous than celebratory. Miguel brought the wagon around, his expression serious. Those men with Senor Hale, he said quietly. They're trouble. I've seen the type before, men who do things for money and don't ask questions. Hired muscle, Ryder said. Figured Victor would bring backup. What do we do? Clara asked. We go home, we keep working. We don't give him any ammunition to use against us. Ryder helped Clara onto the wagon. And we stay alert. They rode back to the ranch in tense silence. Clara kept looking over her shoulder, expecting to see Victor following them, but the road stayed empty. At the ranch, Miguel immediately started checking fence lines and securing the property. Ryder went to the barn to arm himself properly. Clara stood in the main room of the house, her house now, legally, and tried to figure out what came next. The answer arrived 3 hours later. Sheriff Tom Briggs rode up to the ranch alone, his expression apologetic. Clara saw him from the window and her stomach dropped. Ryder met him outside. Sheriff. Ryder, Mrs. Holloway. Briggs tipped his hat to Clara, who'd stepped onto the porch. I'm afraid I have to ask you both some questions. About what? Mr. Victor Hale filed a complaint, claims you kidnapped Miss Whitmore, Mrs. Holloway, I mean, and coerced her into marriage. Says he has evidence she was taken against her will. Ryder's expression went dangerously flat. That's horseshit, and you know it. Maybe so, but I have to investigate. It's my job. Briggs looked genuinely uncomfortable. Mrs. Holloway, did Mr. Ryder Holloway force you to come to Blackthorn Ridge or force you to marry him? No, to both questions. Clara's voice was steady. I answered his advertisement voluntarily. I traveled here by choice. I married him this morning of my own free will. And you're not being threatened or coerced in any way? The only person who ever threatened or coerced me was Victor Hale. Briggs pulled out a small notebook and pencil. That's a serious accusation, ma'am. It's the truth. Victor was violent and controlling throughout our engagement. That's why I left Boston. That's why I came here. And that's why I married Ryder, because he offered me protection from a man who views me as property. You have any proof of this violence? Clara hesitated. Scars. Broken ribs that healed wrong. A doctor in Boston who treated me and asked questions I couldn't answer honestly because Victor was always in the room. Briggs wrote this down slowly. Mr. Hale says you're mentally unstable, that you fled Boston in a state of distress and can't be held responsible for your decisions. I fled Boston in a state of terror. There's a difference. He also says he has legal documents proving you were engaged to be married and that your family supports him taking you back. My family sold me to him like livestock, Clara said, her voice going hard. They arranged the engagement without asking what I wanted. When I tried to tell them about the violence, they said I was exaggerating, that I should be grateful a man of Victor's standing wanted me at all. Briggs looked between them, clearly struggling with whose story to believe. In his experience, wealthy men from back east didn't lie about things like this. But he'd also known Ryder for years, and whatever else the man was, he wasn't a kidnapper. Look, Briggs said finally, I don't know what the truth is here, but I can't ignore a formal complaint. Mr. Hale is talking about getting federal marshals involved, bringing lawyers from Denver, making this into something a lot bigger than a local dispute. Let him, Ryder said. We've got nothing to hide. Maybe not, but he's got money and connections, and you've got... Briggs gestured around at the ranch. This, which he can bury in legal fees faster than you can blink. Clara stepped forward. Sheriff, what would it take for you to close this investigation? Proof that you're here voluntarily and aren't being held against your will. You have my word. With respect, ma'am, your word might not be enough. Not against someone like Hale. Briggs shifted uncomfortably. I need something more concrete. Witnesses who can testify you came here of your own choice. Documentation of the violence you're claiming. Something that stands up in court if this goes that far. The stagecoach driver, Clara said suddenly. Tompkins. He saw me arrive. He can testify I got off the coach voluntarily, that I specifically asked for Ryder by name. That's something. What else? Letters. I have the correspondence between Ryder and me. Months of letters discussing the arrangement, all in my handwriting, all postmarked from Boston. Briggs nodded slowly. That helps. Anything about the violence? Clara was silent for a moment. Then she said quietly, I kept a diary. Had to hide it from Victor, but I documented every incident, dates, details, what he did and what excuses he made afterward. You still have it? It's in my trunk. I brought it with me because I was afraid if I left it behind, someone would find it and destroy it. I'll need to see it. Not to doubt you, ma'am, but because it's evidence. Clara nodded and went inside. Returned a few minutes later with a small leather-bound book worn at the edges. She handed it to Briggs reluctantly. He opened it carefully, reading a few entries. His expression grew darker with each page. Finally, he closed it and handed it back. That's more than enough, he said quietly. Mrs. Holloway, I'm sorry you went through that. Can you close the investigation? I can report that I found no evidence of kidnapping or coercion. Whether that stops Hale is another matter. Briggs looked at Ryder. Watch your back. Men like that don't accept defeat. They just change tactics. I know. After the sheriff left, Clara and Ryder stood on the porch watching him ride away. He's going to escalate, Clara said. Victor doesn't know how to do anything else. Let him. You keep saying that like it's simple. It is simple. He wants you back. I'm not giving you up. Everything else is just details. Clara turned to look at him. Why? Why are you fighting this hard for someone you barely know? Ryder was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, because for 8 years, I didn't fight for anything except survival. Didn't care about anything except getting through each day. And then you showed up, and suddenly I had a reason to care again. To fight again. To be something more than just a ghost living in his own house. I'm not worth all this trouble. That's not your call to make. Clara felt something break open inside her chest. Not breaking apart, breaking open. Letting in light she hadn't felt in years. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. How to trust someone who says they'll protect me. Everyone who ever promised protection before used it as an excuse to control me. I'm not everyone else. I know, but my brain doesn't know that yet. It's still waiting for you to show your real face. The one that hits me when I say the wrong thing or look at you the wrong way. Ryder turned to face her fully. Then I'll keep proving it wrong. Every day. For however long it takes. They stood close enough that Clara could see the gray flecks in his eyes, the lines around his mouth that came from years of not smiling. Close enough that she could smell leather and soap and honest sweat. Close enough that when she leaned forward slightly, testing, he didn't pull away. But he didn't push forward either, just stayed exactly where he was, letting her make the choice. Clara closed the distance and kissed him. It wasn't passionate or desperate, just simple, testing. A question asked without words. Ryder kissed her back carefully, like he was afraid of breaking something fragile. His hand came up to cup her face, calloused and gentle at the same time. When they pulled apart, Clara was shaking. Sorry, Ryder said immediately. If that was... No, don't apologize. Clara's voice was unsteady. I kissed you. I wanted to. I'm not used to it being gentle. Understanding flickered across Ryder's face. We can go as slow as you need. What if I need to go very, very slow? Then that's what we do. Clara felt tears threatening but forced them back. You're a good man, Ryder Holloway. I'm a man who's been alone too long and doesn't want to be alone anymore. He stepped back, giving her space. But that doesn't mean I'll rush you into anything you're not ready for. The marriage is real now, legally. The marriage was real when we signed the papers in the church. Everything else is just us figuring out what it means. They went back inside together. The ranch felt different somehow, less like a temporary shelter and more like a place that might become home. But outside in Blackthorn Ridge, Victor Hale was planning his next move. And his next move would be worse. The next 3 days passed in tense quiet. Victor didn't show himself, which somehow made things worse. Clara kept expecting him to appear on the horizon, to make some dramatic move, but the ranch stayed peaceful in a way that felt like the calm before a storm nobody could predict. Ryder threw himself into work with even more intensity than usual. Up before dawn, riding fence lines until dark, checking and rechecking every corner of the property like he was preparing for siege. Clara managed the house and the books, but she found herself watching the road constantly, jumping at every unfamiliar sound. On the fourth morning, Miguel came back from town with news and a worried expression. "Senor Hale is talking to everyone," he reported, standing in the kitchen doorway while Clara made coffee. "At the saloon, at the mercantile, even outside the church, telling stories about how devoted he is, how far he traveled to rescue his confused fiancée." Clara's hands tightened on the coffee pot. "Is anyone believing him?" "Some. The ones who already didn't trust Senor Ryder." Miguel shifted uncomfortably. "But he's also spending money. Bought drinks for half the saloon last night, promised to donate to the church, offered to invest in some of the struggling businesses. He's buying the town. See, and it's working." Ryder walked in from outside, his shirt already dusty despite the early hour. "Working how?" "Mrs. Hayes and her friends are saying Clara needs to be saved from you," Miguel said bluntly. "That a proper gentleman like Senor Hale wouldn't travel this far unless he truly cared. That maybe the marriage should be investigated more thoroughly." "Sheriff already investigated," Ryder said. "Sheriff closed the case, but people are saying he didn't look hard enough. That maybe he was influenced by local loyalty rather than facts." Clara set down the coffee pot carefully before she could throw it. "Victor's turning the town against us." "He's trying to," Miguel corrected. "But not everyone is listening. Sarah Chen told Mrs. Hayes to mind her own business yesterday. Chester Blackwood said any man who has to buy friends probably doesn't deserve them. And old Hannah Frost, you know her, the seamstress, she told Senor Hale to his face that a real gentleman wouldn't harass a married woman." Despite everything, Clara felt a flicker of warmth. "People are defending us?" "Some. Not many, but some." Miguel looked at Ryder. "Enough to make Senor Hale angry. I heard him arguing with one of his hired men last night, saying things aren't moving fast enough." Ryder's expression went cold. "He's planning something." "Probably. But what?" They didn't have to wait long to find out. That afternoon, while Ryder was in the north pasture and Clara was alone in the house working on invoices, she heard horses approaching, multiple horses, moving fast. She went to the window and felt her blood turn to ice. Victor rode at the front of a group of 5 men, his 2 hired thugs plus 3 she didn't recognize. All of them looked rough, professional, the kind of men who solved problems with violence and didn't ask questions about whether the problems deserved solving. Clara grabbed the rifle Ryder kept near the door and stepped onto the porch, holding it across her chest. Her hand shook, but she kept her voice steady when Victor pulled his horse to a stop 20 feet away. "You're not welcome here." Victor dismounted smoothly, his expression a calculated mix of concern and determination. "Clara, darling, this has gone on long enough. I've tried being patient, tried giving you space to come to your senses. But clearly this man has some hold over you that prevents you from thinking clearly. The only hold he has is being decent to me. You should try it sometime." "I've always been decent to you. I've given you everything." "You gave me broken ribs and nightmares," Clara cut in. "You gave me fear and control disguised as love. You gave me a cage with gold bars and called it devotion." Victor's mask slipped slightly. "You're hysterical. This is exactly why I need to take you somewhere you can get proper care." "I'm not going anywhere with you. I'm afraid that's not your decision anymore." Victor gestured to his men. "I have a doctor's letter stating you're mentally unfit to make your own decisions. I have legal authority to take you back to Boston for treatment." "That's a lie." "Is it?" Victor pulled a folded paper from his jacket. "Dr. Morrison's signature. He examined you 3 months ago, noted signs of instability and emotional fragility. He recommends immediate intervention." Clara's mind raced. Dr. Morrison had examined her after Victor broke her ribs. The doctor who'd asked careful questions she couldn't answer honestly. Victor must have pressured him or paid him or threatened him into signing whatever document he wanted. That doctor never said I was unstable. He said I was injured. Your memory is clearly compromised, another symptom of your condition. Victor took a step forward. Clara raised the rifle. Don't come closer. You're not going to shoot me, Clara. You're not capable of that kind of violence. You'd be surprised what I'm capable of now. They stared at each other across the dusty yard. Victor's men spread out slightly, moving to flank her. Clara's heart hammered, but she kept the rifle steady. This doesn't have to be difficult, Victor said, his voice dropping into that dangerous smoothness he used when he was about to do something cruel. Come with me quietly, and we can forget this entire unfortunate episode. Refuse, and my men will take you by force. Either way, you're leaving this ranch today. You put one hand on her and you'll regret it. The voice came from behind Victor. Everyone turned. Ryder sat on his horse at the edge of the property, perfectly still. Miguel flanked him on the left, also mounted. Both men held rifles across their saddles, not pointed at anyone yet, but ready. Victor's expression hardened. This doesn't concern you anymore, Holloway. The marriage is invalid. I have legal documentation. Don't care about your paperwork. She stays here. I'll have you arrested for obstruction. Try it. Ryder dismounted slowly, keeping his rifle in hand. You're on my property, threatening my wife. That gives me legal right to defend both. One of Victor's men, a scarred thug with dead eyes, shifted his hand toward his gun. Miguel's rifle moved fractionally, now pointed directly at him. I wouldn't, Miguel said quietly. The tension ratcheted up instantly. 6 men with guns, all calculating odds and consequences. Clara felt like she was watching a lit fuse burn toward dynamite. Victor seemed to realize his tactical error. He was outnumbered on unfamiliar ground, far from the legal protections and social advantages he relied on back east. Out here, guns settled disputes faster than lawyers. This isn't over, Victor said, his voice pure venom now. I'll go to the territorial governor. I'll get federal marshals involved. I'll have this entire property seized and you thrown in prison for kidnapping and extortion. You do that, Ryder said flatly. In the meantime, get off my land. Victor mounted his horse with rigid precision. You think you've won something? You've just signed your own death warrant. I will destroy you, Holloway. Your ranch, your reputation, everything you've built. And when I'm done, Clara will have nowhere to go except back to me. She's got somewhere, right here. Victor yanked his horse around and spurred it back toward town, his men following. They disappeared in a cloud of dust and implied violence. The moment they were gone, Clara's knees buckled. She sat down hard on the porch steps, the rifle clattering beside her. Ryder was there immediately, kneeling in front of her. You hurt? No, just... She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't articulate the terror and relief and exhaustion all hitting at once. Ryder took the rifle gently and set it aside, then sat down next to her. Miguel dismounted and did a quick perimeter check before heading to the barn to stable the horses. You did good, Ryder said quietly. Held him off until we got back. I was terrified. Yeah, I could tell. You did it anyway. Clara let out a shaky laugh. He had papers from a doctor saying I'm mentally unstable. Forged or coerced, doesn't matter which, won't hold up. How do you know? Because Sheriff Briggs saw your diary. He knows the truth. And out here, Briggs's word carries more weight than some Boston doctors. Clara wanted to believe him, but Victor's threat kept echoing in her head. Federal marshals, the territorial governor, seizure of property. Victor had resources they couldn't match. He's going to escalate again, she said. This was just the first try. Next time he'll come with actual legal authority, or he'll find another way to force the issue. Probably. So what do we do? Ryder was quiet for a moment, staring out across the land he'd spent 8 years building into something that mattered. Then he said, We fight, and we make sure the town knows the truth before Victor can bury it in lies. How? We go to town, tonight. We talk to people, not Mrs. Hayes and her circle. They're already lost. But the others, the ones who are still listening, we tell them what Victor really is. Clara felt panic rising. You want me to tell strangers about what he did? About the violence? The control? I want you to tell them enough that they question his version of events. You don't have to share everything, just enough to plant doubt. Victor will deny it all. He'll say I'm lying, that I'm unstable, exactly what he's already saying. Maybe. But people in Blackthorn Ridge trust actions more than words. And his actions today, showing up here with hired muscle, trying to take you by force, that doesn't look like a concerned fiancé. That looks like a man trying to reclaim property. Clara turned that over in her mind. Ryder was right. Victor had overplayed his hand by bringing armed men. It made him look desperate rather than devoted. What if it doesn't work? What if people still believe him? Then we've lost nothing we didn't already lose. But if even a few people start questioning his story, that's a few more witnesses on our side if this goes to court. Miguel returned from the barn. Patron, I should tell you, while I was in town this morning, I heard something else. Senor Hale has been asking questions about the ranch. How much land you own, whether you have any debts, who holds the grazing leases. Ryder's expression darkened. He's looking for leverage. See, I think he plans to buy your debt or your leases if he can find them. Force you into a position where you have to negotiate. The grazing leases are through the territorial office. He can't just buy those. No, but he can pay someone to make problems with renewals, claim the land is needed for other purposes, create legal complications that cost time and money to fight. Clara felt sick. He's going to attack from every angle until something breaks. That's what men like him do, Miguel said. They find the weakness and they push until it cracks. But Patron has something Senor Hale doesn't understand. What's that? Stubbornness. Miguel smiled slightly. I've worked for Senor Ryder for 5 years. I've seen him fight drought, disease, predators, market crashes, and his own grief. He doesn't quit, ever. Senor Hale thinks this is about money and legal maneuvering. He doesn't understand he's fighting someone who has nothing left to lose except what he chooses to protect. Ryder glanced at Miguel, surprised. That might be the most you've ever said at once. Seemed important. They went into town that evening, all 3 of them. Safety in numbers, but also a show of unity. Ryder drove the wagon with Clara beside him, Miguel following on horseback. The sun was setting, painting Blackthorn Ridge in orange and shadow. The saloon was their first stop. Ryder rarely went there, hadn't stepped foot inside in years. But it's where the working men gathered. The ranchers, the ranch hands, the men who understood frontier life in a way Boston society never could. The conversation died when they walked in. Every head turned. Ryder stood in the doorway scanning the room, Clara at his shoulder. Most of the faces were neutral, a few hostile, 1 or 2 almost friendly. Chester Blackwood sat at a corner table with 3 other ranchers. He gestured to the empty chairs. Might as well sit if you're here to talk. They sat. The bartender brought whiskey without being asked. Ryder didn't touch his glass, but Clara noticed the gesture. Acknowledgement, if not quite welcome. Heard Victor Hale paid you a visit this afternoon, Chester said without preamble. You heard right. Brought 5 men with him. Tried to take Clara by force. Murmurs around the room. That detail hadn't made it into the gossip yet. That true, Mrs. Holloway? Chester asked. Clara nodded. He claimed he has legal authority. A doctor's letter saying I'm mentally unfit to make my own decisions. Are you? Unfit, I mean? The question was blunt but not unkind. Clara met Chester's eyes directly. No, I'm a woman who escaped an abusive engagement and found somewhere safe. Victor can't accept that, so he's trying to make it look like I'm not capable of choosing my own life. Abusive how? One of the other ranchers asked. Clara took a breath. This was the hard part. He broke my ribs once, blackened my eyes more times than I can count, always where makeup could cover it, controlled when I could leave the house, who I could talk to, what I was allowed to say in public. The engagement wasn't a partnership, it was ownership. Silence fell over the saloon. That's quite an accusation, someone said from across the room. It's the truth. I have documentation, diary entries, medical records. A doctor in Boston who asked questions I couldn't answer honestly because Victor was always present. So why'd you stay? The question came from a younger ranch hand, genuinely curious rather than accusatory, because leaving meant becoming a social pariah. It meant losing my family's support. It meant being hunted by a man with resources I couldn't match. Clara's voice stayed steady. But staying meant dying slowly, piece by piece, until there was nothing left of who I was. So I ran. And I answered an advertisement from a rancher who needed help and offered protection in return. Chester studied her carefully. And Ryder's been treating you right? He gave me my own room with a lock on the door. He asked for help running the ranch, not for anything else. He's been more respectful in 3 weeks than Victor was in 2 years. That's a low bar, Chester observed. It is, but it's still more than I had, Ryder finally spoke up. I placed the advertisement because I needed help. Clara answered it knowing exactly what the arrangement was. We've built a partnership that works. The marriage started as protection, but it's become real. And I'm not letting Victor Hale undo that because he can't accept being told no. One of the older ranchers, a grizzled man named Frank Morrison, leaned forward. Hale's been spreading money around town, making promises, talking about how he wants to invest in Blackthorn Ridge, help it grow. Some folks are listening. He's buying support, Ryder said flatly. Once he gets what he wants, those promises will evaporate. Maybe. Or maybe he's genuine about wanting to help the town. He's not. Claire's voice was hard. Victor doesn't help people. He acquires them. If he's promising investment, it's because he wants control. Give him a foothold and he'll own this town inside a year. The men around the table exchanged glances. They'd seen it before. Wealthy outsiders promising development and prosperity, then taking over local businesses and squeezing out competition. What do you want from us? Chester asked. Nothing except to hear the truth before you decide who to believe, Ryder said. Victor's going to keep pushing. Keep making Clara look unstable and me look like a kidnapper. All I'm asking is that you consider the evidence before accepting his version of events. Chester was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I've known you 8 years, Ryder. You're not warm, you're not friendly, but you're honest. You pay your debts, and you keep your word. That counts for something. Appreciate it. That said, Hale's got legal documents and a smooth way of talking. If this goes to court, you're going to need more than my good opinion. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. They left the saloon 20 minutes later, having said what they came to say. Some of the men seemed convinced. Others remained skeptical. But at least they'd heard Clara's side of the story from her own mouth. Their next stop was the Mercantile, where they found Sarah Chen working late. She looked up when they entered, her expression brightening. Mrs. Holloway. Mr. Holloway. I heard what happened this afternoon. News travels fast, Clara said. It does when it involves armed men showing up at a ranch. Sarah glanced toward the back of the store, then lowered her voice. My husband and I want you to know we don't believe Mr. Hale's version of events. The way he talks about you doesn't sound like concern. It sounds like possession. Clara felt tears threaten but held them back. Thank you. That means more than you know. Some of us remember why people come west. To escape things. To start over. To find something better than what they left behind. Sarah squeezed Clara's hand briefly. Not everyone here is against you. They talked for a few more minutes, then continued down Main Street. At the dress shop, they found Hannah Frost closing up. The old seamstress listened to their story with sharp eyes and sharper questions, then nodded once. I've met men like your Victor Hale, she said. Charming until you cross them, then vicious. You watch yourself, girl. Men like that don't quit. I know. But you've got Ryder on your side now. That counts for something, too. They visited 4 more businesses that evening. The blacksmith, the feed store, the boarding house, the small law office run by a retired attorney named James Wells. Not everyone was sympathetic. Some clearly believed Victor's version more than theirs. But enough people listened, really listened, that Clara felt something shift. They weren't alone in this fight. By the time they headed back to the ranch, full darkness had fallen. Stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. Clara leaned against Ryder's shoulder in the wagon, exhausted but feeling lighter than she had in days. Think it helped? She asked quietly. Don't know yet. But at least people heard your side of it. Victor's going to be furious when he finds out we've been talking to people. Good. Angry people make mistakes. Miguel rode ahead of them, scouting the road. When they were about a mile from the ranch, he pulled his horse to a stop and raised his hand. Ryder immediately reined in the wagon. What is it? Something's wrong. I can smell smoke. They all went still, testing the air. Miguel was right. There was smoke, faint but distinct. And it was coming from the direction of the ranch. Ryder snapped the reins hard, the wagon lurching forward. They covered the last mile at dangerous speed, bouncing over rough ground, Clara gripping the bench to keep from being thrown. The ranch came into view, and Clara's heart stopped. The barn was on fire. Flames licked through the roof, orange and hungry against the night sky. Smoke poured out in thick columns. Inside, horses were screaming. Ryder was off the wagon before it fully stopped, running toward the barn. Miguel right behind him. Clara jumped down and ran after them despite every instinct screaming at her to stay back. Ryder kicked open the barn doors. Heat and smoke billowed out, along with the sounds of terrified animals. He grabbed a saddle blanket, dunked it in the water trough, and wrapped it around his head and shoulders before plunging inside. Miguel did the same, disappearing into the smoke. Clara stood frozen, watching flames spread across the roof, hearing horses crashing against stall doors in panic. She wanted to help but had no idea how. Running into that inferno would just mean 3 people dying instead of 1. Ryder emerged dragging the first horse, the roan mare with the injured flank, wild-eyed and fighting him. He got her clear of the barn and released her. She bolted toward the open pasture. Miguel came out with another horse, then another. Ryder went back in. Clara counted seconds, each one feeling like an hour. Smoke was getting thicker, flames spreading faster. Ryder staggered out with the last horse just as part of the roof collapsed inward with a crash that sent sparks exploding into the night sky. "That's all of them," he gasped, coughing hard. His face was black with soot, his hands burned. "The equipment," Miguel started. "Forget it. Let it burn." They backed away as flames consumed the structure completely. There was no saving it now, no saving the tools, the tack, the feed stores. All they could do was make sure the fire didn't spread to the house or the other outbuildings. Clara grabbed buckets and started a water chain from the well to the nearest structure. Ryder and Miguel joined her despite their exhaustion. They worked for 2 hours, drenching everything within 50 feet of the barn in water, creating a fire break the flames couldn't cross. By the time the barn finally collapsed into glowing embers, all 3 of them were soaked and exhausted and covered in ash. Ryder stood staring at the ruins, his expression unreadable. "Victor did this," Clara said. It wasn't a question. "Probably. Can't prove it, but yeah, probably. He's trying to destroy you financially, force you into a position where you can't afford to keep fighting." "Seems like." Miguel kicked at a piece of charred wood. "The equipment we lost, that's months of income, maybe more. And rebuilding." He didn't finish the sentence. They all knew rebuilding would cost more than the ranch could afford. Clara felt rage building in her chest, hot and dangerous. "We can't let him get away with this." "We won't." Ryder's voice was flat but certain. "But first we deal with the immediate problem. Get the horses settled in the north pasture where there's shelter. Check them for injuries, then we figure out next steps." They worked until dawn, too wired on adrenaline and anger to sleep. By the time the sun came up, they'd accounted for all 6 horses, singed and frightened but alive. The barn was a complete loss. The damage was catastrophic, and Victor Hale had just declared war. Sheriff Briggs arrived at the ranch mid-morning, his face grim as he surveyed the smoking remains of the barn. He walked the perimeter slowly, examining scorched earth and charred timber, occasionally crouching to inspect something more closely. "Any idea how it started?" he asked finally. Ryder stood with his arms crossed, watching the sheriff work. "We were in town, came back and found it burning." "Town? Talking to people about your situation with Mr. Hale, I'm guessing." "That's right." Briggs nodded slowly. "Convenient timing. You gone for a few hours, barn goes up in flames." "Real convenient," Clara said, unable to keep the bitterness out of her voice. "Almost like someone knew we wouldn't be here." The sheriff gave her a long look. "You're suggesting arson." "I'm suggesting Victor Hale is trying to destroy us financially because he can't get what he wants legally." "That's a serious accusation, Mrs. Holloway. You have any proof?" "Do you need proof? Or can you just use common sense and see what's right in front of you?" Briggs sighed heavily. "What I can see is a barn fire. What I can't see is evidence of how it started or who might have started it. Could be arson, could be a lantern knocked over, could be spontaneous combustion in the hay stores." "It was arson," Ryder said flatly. "I checked every lantern before we left. There wasn't anything in that barn that could spontaneously combust. You willing to swear to that in court?" "If it comes to that, yeah." The sheriff walked closer to the ruins, peering at what remained of the barn's entrance. After a moment, he crouched down and picked up something from the ash. A glass bottle, partially melted but still recognizable. "This part of your equipment?" he asked, holding it up. Ryder shook his head. "Never seen it before. Smells like kerosene, or what's left of it after the fire." Briggs wrapped the bottle carefully in a handkerchief. "That's evidence of accelerant. Doesn't prove who did it, but it proves this wasn't an accident." Clara felt vindication and terror in equal measure. "So now what?" "Now I investigate. Talk to people who were in town last night. See if anyone noticed Mr. Hale or his men leaving around the time you were making your rounds." Briggs stood, dusting ash off his knees. "But I'll be honest with you. Even if I find witnesses who saw them leaving town, that doesn't prove they came here. And even if I prove they came here, that doesn't prove they started the fire." "So Victor gets away with it," Clara said. "I didn't say that. I said it's hard to prove. There's a difference." The sheriff looked at Ryder. "How much damage we talking about in terms of money?" "Equipment, tack, feed stores, the structure itself?" Ryder calculated in his head. $800, maybe more. Briggs whistled low. "That's steep. You insured?" "No." "Then you're in a tight spot. Rebuilding is going to take capital you probably don't have, which means taking on debt, which means I'm vulnerable," Ryder finished, "which is exactly what Victor wants." The three of them stood in silence, watching smoke still curling up from the ruins. The full weight of their situation was becoming clear. Victor had found their weakness and struck hard. "There's something else you should know," Briggs said reluctantly. "Mr. Hale filed papers yesterday with the territorial office. He's contesting your grazing leases, claiming you don't have clear title to some of the land you're using." Ryder's expression went dangerously cold. "My leases are in order, have been for 8 years. I'm sure they are, but contesting them means tying them up in administrative review, which could take months, during which time you can't legally graze cattle on that land. That's half my operation." "I know." Clara felt sick. Victor wasn't just attacking them directly. He was systematically dismantling the ranch from multiple angles. Legal challenges, financial pressure, physical sabotage. He was using every resource he had to back them into a corner. "Can we fight the lease challenge?" she asked. "You can, but it requires lawyers, filing fees, possibly traveling to the territorial capital for hearings, all of which costs money." Briggs looked apologetic. "I'm not saying this to discourage you. I'm saying it so you know what you're up against." "We know what we're up against," Ryder said. "A rich bastard who thinks money solves everything." "Money solves a lot of things out here. That's just reality." After the sheriff left, Clara and Ryder stood in the yard staring at the destroyed barn. Miguel had gone to check on the horses in the north pasture, leaving them alone with their thoughts. "We can't win this," Clara said quietly. "Can we?" Ryder didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was tired. "Don't know. Maybe not the way we want to." "What does that mean?" "It means Victor's playing a game where he has all the advantages. Money, connections, legal resources. We can't match him on those terms." "So what do we do?" Ryder turned to look at her, really look at her. "We could walk away. Both of us. Head further west, start over somewhere Victor can't find us." Clara felt her heart constrict. "You'd give up the ranch? Everything you built?" "It's just land and cattle. I can build again." "This isn't just land to you. This is 8 years of work. 8 years of grief you poured into something productive. Walking away would destroy you. Staying might destroy us both." They stood in silence, the morning sun climbing higher, heating the ash-covered ground. Clara thought about running again. Always running, never standing still long enough for the past to catch up. It had worked once. Maybe it would work again, but she was tired of running. "No," she said finally. "No? I'm not running anymore. I ran from Boston. I ran from Victor. I ran from everything that scared me. And you know what? He still found me. He'll always find me unless I make him stop." "How do you make a man like Victor Hale stop?" "I don't know, but running away won't do it." Clara turned to face him fully. "You said this ranch is just land and cattle. Maybe to you it is. But to me, it's the first place I've felt safe in years. The first place where I had choices instead of orders, where someone asked what I needed instead of telling me what I wanted." Ryder's expression softened slightly. "Clara, I know it's not fair. I know you didn't sign up to fight my battles, But if we run now, Victor wins, and I'm so tired of men like him winning. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we fight back, not just defensively, actually fight back. With what? We don't have money for lawyers, or we have the truth. We have witnesses who saw Victor's men in town last night. We have evidence of arson. We have my diary documenting years of abuse. Clara's voice grew stronger as she spoke. And we have people in this town who are starting to question Victor's version of events. That's something. It's not enough. Maybe not, but it's what we have. And I'd rather go down fighting than run away and spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. Ryder studied her for a long moment. Then something shifted in his expression, the dead-eyed resignation he'd worn for 8 years cracking open to reveal something harder underneath, something that had been buried but not destroyed. All right, he said, we fight, but we do it smart. What does smart look like? It looks like we stop reacting to what Victor does and start forcing him to react to us. He wants to tie us up in legal battles? We make those battles public. We get the newspaper involved, get people asking questions about why a wealthy Boston man is targeting a frontier rancher and his wife. Clara felt hope flickering to life. The territorial papers might not care, but the local ones would, especially if we frame it as outsider interference in local affairs. Exactly. And we document everything, every threat, every attack, every legal maneuver. Build a record that shows a pattern of harassment. What about the barn? The financial hit? Ryder's jaw tightened. We rebuild, smaller, cheaper, but functional. And we ask for help. Help from who? The other ranchers. The people in town who aren't in Victor's pocket. Out here, barn raising is community work. If we ask, some will come. It was the first time Clara had heard Ryder suggest asking anyone for anything. For a man who'd spent 8 years isolated and self-reliant, it was a massive admission. You think they'll help? She asked. Some will. The ones who respect honesty more than money. It won't be everyone, but it'll be enough. They spent the rest of that day making plans. Clara drafted a letter to the editor of the Blackthorn Ridge Gazette, a small weekly paper run by a woman named Judith Marsh, who had a reputation for not backing down from controversial stories. Ryder rode to the neighboring ranches, not begging for help, but simply informing them about the fire and his plans to rebuild. Miguel returned from checking the horses with cautious optimism. They're settling down. The roan's got some burns on her flank, but nothing that won't heal. The others are mostly just scared. Good. We'll keep them in the north pasture for now, away from the house. Don't want them spooked if Victor tries something else. You think he will? Try something else? I know he will, Clara said. This is just the beginning. She was right. 2 days later, a well-dressed man arrived at the ranch in an expensive buggy. He introduced himself as Leonard Whitmore, Clara's father. She stood on the porch watching him climb down from the buggy with a mix of emotions she couldn't untangle. Anger, hurt, a small, pathetic part of her that still wanted her father's approval despite everything. Clara, Leonard said, removing his hat, we need to talk. No, we don't. Please, just hear me out. Ryder appeared at Clara's shoulder, a silent presence that said she didn't have to face this alone. Leonard noticed him and his expression hardened slightly. Mr. Holloway, I presume. That's right. I'd like to speak with my daughter privately. Not happening, Clara said flatly. Anything you have to say you can say in front of my husband. Leonard winced at the word husband. Claire, your mother is beside herself. Your sisters are humiliated. The scandal you've caused. The scandal I caused? Not the scandal of Victor Hale beating his fiancée? Not the scandal of my family ignoring it? We didn't ignore it. We addressed it with Victor directly. He assured us it was a misunderstanding. He broke my ribs. The words landed like stones. Leonard actually flinched. Clara, you have to understand, Victor is a powerful man. An alliance with his family would have secured our position in society for generations. When you ran away, you didn't just embarrass yourself. You damaged the entire family's reputation. I saved my life. You ruined your future and ours. Leonard's voice hardened. But Victor is willing to forgive this entire episode if you come home now. The marriage can be annulled on grounds of mental instability. Victor already has the documentation prepared. You can return to Boston, undergo treatment for a few months, and then proceed with the wedding as originally planned. Clara felt ice spreading through her chest. You're here to take me back to him. I'm here to save you from the consequences of your poor judgment. My poor judgment was staying engaged to him as long as I did. Clara, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. I'm choosing to stay in a marriage where I'm respected and safe instead of returning to one where I was property and punching bag. Leonard's expression shifted, becoming harder, more calculating. If you refuse to come voluntarily, Victor has legal recourse. He can have you declared incompetent and removed from this man's custody by force. Let him try, Ryder said quietly. Leonard turned his attention to Ryder, looking him up and down with obvious disdain. You're a rancher on a failing operation in the middle of nowhere. Victor has resources you can't imagine. Legal teams, political connections, the backing of some of the most powerful families in Boston. You think you can stand against that? Don't need to stand against it. Just need to stand for her. How noble, how remarkably naive. Leonard's voice dripped with condescension. Do you have any idea what you've involved yourself in? This isn't some frontier dispute over grazing rights. This is about families, fortunes, social position, things that matter in the real world. This is the real world, Clara said. Your world is the fake one, where violence gets covered up with good manners and women are traded like livestock to secure business deals. You ungrateful... Leonard stopped himself, taking a breath. When he spoke again, his voice was controlled but cold. I tried to do this the civil way. But if you insist on being stubborn, so be it. Victor has filed papers declaring you mentally incompetent. He has statements from doctors, testimony from family members, documentation of your erratic behavior. Within the week, a judge will review the case and very likely grant him legal authority to have you removed from this ranch by force if necessary. No judge out here will honor that, Ryder said. The territorial judge might, especially when he learns about the very generous donation Victor is making to the court's discretionary fund. Bribery. Of course. Victor was buying a judgment the same way he bought everything else. Even if that works, Clara said, fighting to keep her voice steady, even if some corrupt judge signs the papers, I won't go quietly. I'll fight. I'll testify. I'll show everyone who Victor Hale really is. And who will believe you? A woman declared mentally incompetent by medical professionals and her own family, or a respected gentleman from one of Boston's finest families? Leonard shook his head. You have no idea how this works, Clara. The truth doesn't matter. Only the story people believe matters. And Victor controls that story. He turned toward his buggy, then paused and looked back. You have 3 days to reconsider. After that, Victor proceeds with the legal removal. I suggest you use that time to think very carefully about what you're throwing away. He climbed into the buggy and drove off without looking back. Clara stood frozen on the porch, feeling like the ground had just dropped out from under her. Everything they'd been trying to build, safety, stability, a future, Victor was systematically destroying it piece by piece. He's bluffing, Ryder said, though he didn't sound convinced. About the judge, about being able to force you. He's not bluffing. Victor never bluffs. If my father came all the way from Boston to deliver that message, it means everything he said is already in motion. Then we fight it in court. With what money? What lawyers? Ryder, we can barely afford to rebuild the barn. We can't afford a legal battle against Victor's resources. They stood in heavy silence. Every option seemed to lead to the same place, defeat. Miguel approached from the barn area, his expression troubled. Patron, we have another problem. What now? The cattle. Someone cut the fence on the east pasture. About 40 head are missing. Ryder's face went white. Missing or scattered? Missing. The tracks lead south toward the canyon country. If they went in there, we might not get them back. Clara felt like she was watching everything collapse in slow motion. The barn, the legal threats. Now the cattle. Victor was attacking from every direction simultaneously, overwhelming them with problems faster than they could respond. How many men do we need to track them? Ryder asked. At least 4, maybe 5. The canyon country is dangerous, easy to lose the trail. We don't have 4 men. I know. Ryder turned to Clara. I have to go after them. Those cattle represent half our remaining assets. If we lose them, I know. Go. I'll hold things down here. Clara, if Victor makes a move while I'm gone, then I'll deal with it. I'm not helpless, Ryder. He looked at her for a long moment, conflict clear on his face. Finally, he nodded. Keep the rifle close. Don't open the door for anyone you don't trust. If anything feels wrong, fire 3 shots. I'll hear it and come back. How long will you be gone? Day, maybe 2? Depends on how far they scattered. He touched her face briefly, a gesture that surprised them both. Be careful. You too. Ryder and Miguel gathered supplies quickly. Bedrolls, food, water, ammunition. Within an hour they were mounted and heading south, following tracks that led toward the most unforgiving terrain in the territory. Clara watched them disappear over the horizon, then turned back to the ranch. It felt enormous and empty without them. Vulnerable. She checked the rifle, made sure it was loaded, and positioned it near the front door where she could reach it quickly. Then she tried to focus on normal tasks, updating the ledgers, preparing food, anything to keep her mind occupied. The first day passed without incident. Night fell and Clara barricaded herself in the house, listening to every sound outside. Wind. Coyotes. The normal symphony of frontier darkness. But every noise made her tense, expecting Victor or his men to appear. The second day started the same way. Quiet. Almost too quiet. Around noon, she heard horses approaching. Multiple horses. Claire grabbed the rifle and went to the window. 5 riders coming up the road. Not Victor's men. She recognized Chester Blackwood at the front, along with several other ranchers from town. She stepped onto the porch, rifle still in hand but pointed at the ground. Mrs. Holloway, Chester called out as they approached. We heard about your cattle going missing. Came to help with the search if you need it. Clara felt emotion clog her throat. Ryder and Miguel already went after them. I know, but more hands means better chance of finding them before they're completely scattered. Chester dismounted. Also heard about the barn, and about your father's visit. News travels fast. It does, especially when people are paying attention. He gestured to the other ranchers. Frank Morrison, Tom Chen, Daniel Frost, and Jack Hayes. Clara recognized the last name. Hayes? Any relation to Mrs. Cordelia Hayes? Jack Hayes, a younger man with kind eyes, nodded. My mother, she has opinions, but I don't share all of them. My wife Sarah spoke highly of you, said you treated her with respect when a lot of the town was treating you like scandal. Your wife is Sarah Chen? That's right. We got married last year. Town didn't like that much either. Chinese immigrant marrying into a white family. So we understand something about being judged unfairly. The other ranchers murmured agreement. These weren't the powerful men of Blackthorn Ridge. These were the working ranchers, the ones who understood what it meant to fight for something against impossible odds. I don't know what to say, Clara managed. Don't say anything, Chester replied. Just point us toward where Ryder went and we'll help bring those cattle back. After that, we'll talk about rebuilding your barn. I can't pay you. Didn't ask for payment. This is what neighbors do. Something in Clara's chest cracked open. For weeks, she'd felt like she and Ryder were fighting alone. But they weren't alone. Not completely. They headed south toward the canyon country, she said. Left yesterday morning. We'll find them. You stay here. Keep yourself safe. Lock the doors. Don't let anyone in you don't trust. The ranchers headed south, disappearing into the same landscape that had swallowed Ryder and Miguel. Clara went back inside, feeling slightly less alone, but still tense. That feeling proved justified when, just before sunset, another visitor arrived. Victor Hale rode up to the ranch alone this time. No hired muscle, no threatening posture. He looked almost vulnerable, which immediately put Clara on guard. Victor at his most dangerous was Victor pretending to be reasonable. She met him on the porch with the rifle. Clara, please. I just want to talk. We have nothing to talk about. I think we do. He dismounted slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. I know you're angry. I know you think I've treated you poorly, but I'm asking you to see this from my perspective. Your perspective involves broken ribs and controlling every aspect of my life. I've seen enough of that perspective. Victor's expression shifted, something that looked almost like genuine pain crossing his face. I know I made mistakes. I know I let my temper control me in ways I shouldn't have, but I've changed, Clara. I've been working with a doctor to manage my anger, to understand what triggered those episodes. Episodes? You mean the times you beat me? He flinched. Yes, and I take full responsibility for them. What I did was wrong, unforgivable. But I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove I can be better. Clara wanted to believe it was manipulation, and it probably was. But there was something in Victor's voice that sounded almost sincere, which made it more dangerous, not less. Even if I believed you'd changed, which I don't, I'm married to someone else now. That door is closed. The marriage can be annulled. Your father explained the process. My father explained a process that involves declaring me mentally incompetent and stripping away my legal rights. That's not a process. That's ownership. It's protection. Clara, look at where you are. A failing ranch in the middle of nowhere, married to a man who can barely keep his operation running, surrounded by people who don't trust either of you. Is this really the life you want? It's better than the life you offered. Is it? You have no money, no security, no future? Holloway's ranch is bleeding money. The barn fire alone put him in debt he can't recover from. And when the judge grants my petition, which he will, you'll be removed from here by force if necessary. Why go through that trauma when you could just come home with me now voluntarily? This is home. Victor's mask slipped slightly. Frustration flickered across his features. You're being irrational. I'm being free. There's a difference. Free? He laughed bitterly. You're trapped here. Trapped by a marriage you entered out of desperation. Trapped by a situation that's deteriorating daily. At least with me, you'd have comfort, security, a place in society. I'd have a cage. A comfortable cage, but still a cage. They stared at each other across 10 feet of dusty ground. Victor seeing a possession that had escaped. Clara seeing a predator who would never stop hunting. 3 days, Victor said finally, his voice cold now. That's what your father said, and I'm holding to it. 3 days to reconsider. After that, I proceed with the legal removal. And Clara? His expression went hard. If you force me to do it that way, I won't be gentle about it. I won't be understanding. You'll be declared incompetent, possibly institutionalized for your own protection, and by the time you're released, if you're released, you'll wish you'd come with me today. He mounted his horse and rode off without waiting for a response. Clara stood on the porch, shaking with rage and fear in equal measure. 3 days. 72 hours before Victor made his move. She went inside and barricaded the door, then sat at the table with the rifle across her lap and Clara's diary open in front of her. She read through the entries documenting Victor's abuse, her own words describing the terror and helplessness she'd felt. She would not go back to that, no matter what it cost. Ryder returned late the next afternoon with Miguel, Chester, and the other ranchers. They'd recovered 38 of the 40 missing cattle, better than expected given the terrain. Everyone was exhausted, covered in dust, but there was a sense of accomplishment. Clara met them in the yard and immediately saw the question in Ryder's eyes. Are you all right? She nodded, not trusting her voice yet. The ranchers helped get the cattle settled back in secure pasture, then gathered near the house. Chester outlined a plan for the barn raising. They'd start in 3 days, bring materials and labor, have a basic structure up within a week. 3 days, Clara said quietly. That's when Victor makes his legal move. The celebration died instantly. Ryder's expression went dark. What happened? Claire explained Victor's visit, his threats, the 3-day deadline. The ranchers listened with increasingly troubled faces. He can't just take you, Frank Morrison said. Judge or no judge, this is still frontier territory. We have our own ways of handling things. Victor's counting on legal authority trumping local custom, Clara said. Then we make sure it doesn't. Chester looked at Ryder. You willing to fight this all the way? To the end. Even if it means trouble with territorial authorities? Even then. The ranchers exchanged glances. Then one by one they nodded. All right, Chester said. Then we do this together. Barn raising starts tomorrow instead of 3 days from now. We get that structure up fast, show the community this ranch isn't failing. Meanwhile, we get word to every rancher and farmer in 50 miles. When Victor comes with his papers and his hired men, he's going to find a lot more resistance than he's expecting. You don't have to do this, Clara said. This isn't your fight. Maybe not, but it's the right fight. Chester looked around at the other men. We came west to get away from the kind of people who think money and position entitle them to own other people. If we let Victor Hale waltz in here and take what he wants just because he's rich, what's the point of being out here at all? The other ranchers voiced agreement. For the first time since the barn burned, Clara felt something other than fear. She felt hope. The barn raising started at dawn the next morning with 23 people showing up, more than Clara had expected, more than even Chester had promised. Ranchers and their hands, shopkeepers who could spare a few hours, even old Hannah Frost arrived with her grandson to help however they could. Sarah Chen brought food enough to feed an army. Jack Hayes brought lumber his family had been storing. The blacksmith, a burly man named Otto, brought tools and hardware at cost. They weren't just building a barn, they were making a statement. Ryder stood in the middle of controlled chaos, directing work crews with an efficiency Clara hadn't seen before. He'd spent 8 years working alone, refusing help, but now he coordinated efforts like a general marshaling troops. Posts went up. Framework took shape. The sound of hammers and saws filled the air where there had been only silence and ash. Clara worked alongside Sarah and several other women, preparing food and carrying water to the workers. Around mid-morning, Mrs. Cordelia Hayes appeared at the edge of the property, watching from a distance. She didn't offer help, but she didn't leave either. Just stood there observing, her expression unreadable. "My mother-in-law is complicated," Sarah said quietly, following Clara's gaze. "She believes in propriety above almost everything else, but she also raised her son to think for himself. And right now, those two values are at war in her head. Which one will win? Don't know yet. But the fact that she's here at all says something." By afternoon, the basic structure was standing. It wasn't pretty and it wasn't finished, but it was functional, a testament to what a community could accomplish when it decided to act. Clara watched from the porch as workers secured the last of the roof beams, feeling emotion catch in her throat. Ryder climbed down from the framework and walked over, his shirt soaked with sweat, his hands raw. "Not bad for one day's work?" "It's incredible. It's enough. That's all it needs to be." He looked at her carefully. "You doing all right? You've been quiet. Just thinking about tomorrow, about what happens when Victor shows up with his papers and his authority. We'll handle it." "You keep saying that, but I don't know how. If he has a judge's orders, then we challenge the order, make him prove his case in front of witnesses, make it public and messy instead of quiet and controlled." Ryder's voice was firm. "Victor's power comes from operating in the shadows, using money and influence where people can't see it. We drag everything into the light." Chester approached, wiping his forehead with a bandana. "We're breaking for the day. Tomorrow we'll finish the interior work and get the doors hung. Should be fully functional by end of day." "I don't know how to thank you," Clara said. "Don't thank me yet. The hard part comes tomorrow when Hale arrives." Chester's expression was serious. "I talked to Sheriff Briggs this morning. He's aware of the situation. Says if Hale shows up with legal papers, he has to enforce them unless there's clear evidence they were obtained fraudulently." "Which there is," Clara said. "The doctor's letter declaring me incompetent is based on an examination that never happened. The family testimony is coerced. The whole thing is manufactured." "Can you prove it?" "I can testify to it. I have my diary, but I don't know if that's enough against Victor's resources." Chester was quiet for a moment, thinking. There might be another way. Something that doesn't require out-lawyering him. What? Public opinion. If enough people witness what's happening and speak against it, even a corrupt judge has to consider the political consequences. Territorial judges are appointed, but they can be removed if there's enough pressure. You're talking about turning this into a spectacle. I'm talking about making it impossible for Victor to take you quietly. If he wants to use legal force, he does it in front of the whole town with everyone watching and recording what happens. Ryder nodded slowly. "When's he supposed to arrive with the papers?" "Tomorrow afternoon, according to what Claire's father said. 3 days from his visit. Then we make sure everyone in Blackthorn Ridge knows to be at the ranch tomorrow afternoon. We turn this into a public hearing instead of a private abduction." Clara felt fear and determination warring in her chest. Everything could go wrong. Victor could still win, but at least it would be a fight, not a surrender. The workers dispersed as evening approached, promising to return tomorrow for the final work. Ryder, Clara, and Miguel sat on the porch as the sun set, watching the skeleton of the new barn cast long shadows across the yard. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Miguel said quietly, "you should know something. I've worked for many patrones over the years, some good, some bad, most just trying to survive. But you, Senor Ryder, you're the first one who ever treated me like a partner instead of just hired help. And Senora Clara, you're the first woman I've met who had the courage to choose her own life instead of accepting the one given to her." "Miguel," Ryder started. "Let me finish. What I'm saying is, tomorrow when Senor Hale comes, He will find more than just you two standing here. He will find everyone who believes that some things matter more than money and power. And maybe that won't be enough, but maybe it will be. They sat in silence as darkness fell, each lost in their own thoughts about what morning would bring. Clara barely slept that night. She lay in bed listening to the house settle, the wind outside, the distant sounds of cattle and coyotes. Around midnight, she gave up and went to the kitchen, finding Ryder already there, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. "Haven't really slept in 8 years. Not well, anyway." Clara poured herself coffee and sat across from him. "Can I ask you something? When Emma and Catherine died, how did you keep going? What made you get up every morning and keep working?" Ryder was quiet for a long time, staring into his coffee. "Honestly, I didn't have a good reason. I just couldn't figure out how to stop. Stopping meant sitting still with the grief, and I wasn't ready for that. So I worked. I built the ranch because it was something to do that wasn't falling apart. And now I have a reason. You." He looked up at her directly. "I know we started this as an arrangement. I know neither of us expected it to become real, but somewhere along the way it did, and I'll be damned if I let Victor Hale take that away." Clara felt tears threatening. "I'm scared, Ryder. Not of Victor exactly, but of losing this, of having to go back to being the person I was before, small and controlled and afraid all the time." "You're not that person anymore." "How do you know?" "Because that person would never have stood on the porch with a rifle telling Victor to leave. That person would never have confronted her father or testified to the sheriff or stood up to Mrs. Hayes in the middle of the general store." Ryder reached across the table and took her hand. "You're stronger than you think. Always have been. You just needed somewhere safe enough to show it. What if tomorrow doesn't go our way? Then we try something else. We keep fighting until there's nothing left to fight with. But we don't give up. And we don't let him win." Clara squeezed his hand, drawing strength from the certainty in his voice. They sat like that until the first gray light of dawn started creeping through the windows. The day arrived with cruel sunshine and clear skies, beautiful weather for what would likely be an ugly confrontation. The workers returned early to finish the barn. By 10 o'clock, the structure was complete. Doors hung, interior organized, even a fresh coat of whitewash on the exterior. It wasn't the barn they'd lost, but it was solid and functional, proof that they could rebuild. By noon, people started gathering, not just the workers from yesterday, but others who'd heard what was happening. Some came to support Clara and Ryder. Others came out of curiosity. A few clearly came hoping to see Victor succeed. Judith Marsh from the Gazette arrived with a notepad and sharp eyes, ready to document everything. Sheriff Briggs showed up looking uncomfortable, but determined to do his job, whatever that entailed. Even Reverend Pike made an appearance, standing at the edge of the growing crowd with a conflicted expression. Around 1 o'clock, the crowd had swelled to maybe 70 people, a significant portion of Blackthorn Ridge's population. They gathered in the yard and along the fence line, talking quietly among themselves, everyone waiting for the same thing. Victor Hale arrived at precisely 2 o'clock. He rode at the front of an official-looking procession, a territorial marshal, 2 deputies, a man in a suit who was clearly a lawyer, and Victor's hired muscle bringing up the rear. It was designed to look legitimate, authoritative, overwhelming. But Victor's expression changed when he saw the crowd. This wasn't what he'd expected. This was supposed to be a quiet legal procedure, not a public spectacle. The marshal, a weathered man named Garrett with tired eyes, dismounted and approached Ryder. "Mr. Holloway, I have legal documents requiring the transfer of Clara Whitmore into the custody of her legal guardian pending a competency hearing. She's Clara Holloway now," Ryder said clearly, "and she's not going anywhere. Sir, I understand this is difficult, but I have a judge's order. I'm required to enforce it." "Can I see the order?" Judith Marsh pushed forward, notepad ready. Garrett looked uncertain. "This is a legal matter, ma'am. This is a public enforcement of a legal order on private property in front of 70 witnesses. I'd say that makes it news." She smiled politely, but her eyes were steel. "The order, please." Garrett reluctantly handed over the documents. Judith read them carefully, while the crowd waited in tense silence. After several minutes, she looked up. These papers declare Clara Whitmore mentally incompetent based on testimony from Dr. Morrison of Boston, statements from her family, and evidence of erratic behavior. However, I don't see any evaluation from a local doctor or any independent verification of these claims. The territorial judge deemed the evidence sufficient, the lawyer interjected. The territorial judge also received a substantial donation to the court's discretionary fund the day before issuing this order, Judith said flatly. I have documentation. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The lawyer's expression hardened. That's a serious accusation. It's a fact, and I'm publishing it in this week's edition along with a full account of these proceedings. Judith turned to the marshal. Marshal Garrett, are you comfortable enforcing an order that appears to have been purchased rather than legitimately obtained? Garrett shifted uncomfortably. Ma'am, I don't make judgments about how orders are obtained. I just enforce them. Even when they're fraudulent? I don't have authority to determine fraud. That's for courts to decide. Clara stepped forward, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Then let me testify right here, right now, in front of everyone. Let Marshal Garrett and the town decide if I seem mentally incompetent. Victor finally spoke, his voice tight with controlled anger. This is highly irregular. No more irregular than buying a judge's ruling. Ryder shot back. Sheriff Briggs stepped forward. Actually, Mrs. Holloway has a point. If there's a question of mental competency, it seems reasonable to allow her to speak for herself before enforcing removal. The marshal considered this, clearly uncomfortable with the whole situation. All right, Mrs. Holloway, you may speak. Clara took a deep breath and addressed the crowd directly. My name is Clara Holloway. 6 weeks ago, I was Clara Whitmore, engaged to Victor Hale of Boston. During our 2-year engagement, Victor was violent, controlling, and abusive. He broke my ribs, blackened my eyes, and controlled every aspect of my life while maintaining a public image of devoted fiancé. Lies, Victor said sharply. She's delusional. I have documentation, Clara continued, pulling her diary from her pocket. 2 years of entries describing every incident in detail. Dates, injuries, witnesses who saw the aftermath even if they didn't see the violence itself. I also have medical records from Dr. Morrison, the same doctor who supposedly declared me incompetent, showing treatment for injuries consistent with physical abuse. She handed the diary to Marshal Garrett. He read several pages, his expression growing darker. These are just the writings of an unstable woman, the lawyer argued. Then explain the medical records, Sheriff Briggs said, producing copies he'd obtained during his investigation. Treatment for broken ribs, facial contusions, defensive wounds on her arms, all documented by the same doctor who later signed the competency declaration. The crowd's murmuring grew louder. People were connecting dots, seeing the pattern. Victor's composure finally cracked. This is absurd. Clara is my fiancée. She fled Boston in a state of mental distress and was manipulated by this man, he pointed at Ryder, into a fraudulent marriage. I'm here to take her home where she can receive proper care. I'm already home, Clara said clearly, and I'm not going anywhere with you. You don't have a choice. I have legal authority. You have a purchased order based on fraudulent testimony. Clara's voice grew stronger. And I'm challenging it publicly, with witnesses, with documentation, and with my own testimony that I am of sound mind and acting of my own free will. Marshal Garrett looked between Clara and Victor, clearly struggling with what to do. Ma'am, even with your testimony, I have an order from a territorial judge. Unless that order is officially challenged and overturned, then I'm officially challenging it, a new voice said. Everyone turned. Mrs. Cordelia Hayes stood at the edge of the crowd, her expression severe, but her voice firm. I'm challenging it as well, Chester Blackwood added. And I am, said Hannah Frost. And me, Sarah Chen said. One by one, people in the crowd spoke up. Not everyone. Some still looked skeptical, some clearly sided with Victor. But enough voices rose in support that the marshal's face showed increasing uncertainty. Reverend Pike stepped forward. Marshal Garrett, I've known Clara Holloway since she arrived in Blackthorn Ridge. I performed her marriage ceremony. I've spoken with her extensively. While I had reservations about the circumstances of her marriage, I have never observed any indication of mental incompetence. Quite the opposite. She's demonstrated remarkable clarity of purpose and strength of character. This is a conspiracy, Victor said, his voice rising. You're all protecting a criminal who kidnapped my fiancée. Nobody kidnapped anyone, Judith Marsh interrupted, reading from her notes. I have testimony from the stagecoach driver who brought Clara to Blackthorn Ridge. He states she arrived voluntarily, asked for Mr. Holloway by name, and showed no signs of coercion. I also have the correspondence between Clara and Ryder, months of letters discussing the arrangement, all in Clara's handwriting, all postmarked from Boston before she ever left. Victor's lawyer tried to interject, but Judith kept talking, louder now. Furthermore, I have statements from multiple townspeople documenting Mr. Hale's attempts to purchase support, his use of hired men to intimidate the Holloways, and evidence suggesting his involvement in the barn fire that destroyed their property last week. That's defamation? The lawyer started. That's journalism, and it's all going in this week's paper. Judith looked directly at Marshal Garrett. Now, Marshal, you can enforce that questionable order if you want, but you'll do it in front of all these witnesses, and every detail will be published for the entire territory to read, including the parts about judicial corruption and purchase testimony. The marshal looked genuinely distressed now. This was supposed to be a simple enforcement action, not a public trial, with a journalist documenting everything. I need time to consult with the territorial office, he said finally. This situation is more complicated than I was led to believe. You don't have time, Victor started. Mr. Hale, I suggest you step back. The marshal's voice carried authority now. This order may be legitimate or it may not, but I'm not enforcing it until I've verified the circumstances under which it was obtained. That's my right as an officer of the territorial government. Victor's face flushed red with rage. This is outrageous. I have legal authority. I have documentation. You have a problem, Ryder said quietly. You thought you could buy your way through this like you buy everything else, but you're not in Boston anymore. Out here, character matters more than money, and yours is showing pretty clearly right now. Victor took a step toward Ryder, his fists clenched. His hired men moved forward with him. Immediately, several of the ranchers positioned themselves between Victor and Ryder, creating a human barrier. You want to try force? Chester asked calmly. Because there's about 30 men here who will have something to say about that. The tension ratcheted up to breaking point. Victor and his men on one side, the ranchers on the other, the marshal in the middle trying to prevent violence. Clara stepped into the space between them. Stop, she said, her voice cutting through the tension. Victor, look at what you're doing. Look at what you've become. You came here claiming you loved me, claiming you wanted to protect me. But everything you've done has been about control and possession, buying judges, threatening violence, destroying property. That's not love, that's obsession. I did everything for you, or you did everything for yourself, because you can't accept that I chose to leave, that I chose someone else, that I chose freedom over the cage you built around me. Victor's expression twisted with something between rage and pain. You're making the biggest mistake of your life. No. The biggest mistake of my life was staying with you as long as I did, but I'm done making that mistake. She turned to Marshal Garrett. I'm formally requesting that you investigate the circumstances under which that order was obtained. I'm requesting an independent medical evaluation, and I'm requesting that no enforcement action be taken until proper due process has occurred. The marshal looked relieved to have a clear path forward. That's reasonable. I'll send word to the territorial office immediately. In the meantime, no action will be taken regarding custody. This isn't over, Victor said, his voice pure venom. I'll appeal. I'll go higher. You'll leave, Sheriff Briggs interrupted. Right now, before I arrest you for disturbing the peace and making threats. Victor looked around at the crowd of hostile faces, at the marshal who wasn't going to enforce his order, at Clara standing firm beside Ryder. For the first time since arriving in Blackthorn Ridge, he seemed to realize he'd lost. You'll regret this, he said to Clara. All of you will. We'll take our chances, Ryder replied. Victor mounted his horse stiffly, his hired men following. The lawyer tried to make some formal protest, but the marshal waved him off. They rode away slowly, Victor looking back once with an expression of pure hatred. The crowd watched them disappear down the road. Then slowly, people started talking again, some congratulating Clara and Ryder, others debating what they'd witnessed. The tension began to bleed away, replaced by cautious celebration. Judith Marsh approached Clara with her notepad. Mrs. Holloway, I'd like to do a full interview for the paper. Your story deserves to be told properly. Will it help, telling it publicly? It'll make it a lot harder for Hale to manipulate the narrative, and it might help other women who are in similar situations realize they have options. Clara glanced at Ryder, who nodded slightly. All right, let's tell the story. Over the next hour, Clara gave Judith a detailed account of everything: the abuse, the escape, the arrangement with Ryder, Victor's attempts to reclaim her. Judith wrote it all down with meticulous care, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When they finished, Judith closed her notepad. This will be in next week's edition. I'm also sending copies to the territorial papers. By the time Victor tries to make another move, everyone in the territory will know what kind of man he is. Thank you. Don't thank me. Thank yourself for being brave enough to tell the truth. The crowd dispersed gradually as evening approached. Some people left still skeptical, still believing Clara and Ryder were somehow in the wrong. But many others left as allies, people who'd witnessed the confrontation and chosen a side. Chester was one of the last to leave. That was gutsy what you did, both of you. Didn't feel gutsy, Clara said. Felt terrifying. Best kind of courage is doing it even when you're scared. He looked at the new barn, solid and complete. You're going to make it, the ranch, the marriage, all of it. You've got something Victor Hale never understood. You've got people who stand with you not because they're paid to, but because they want to. After everyone left, Clara, Ryder, and Miguel stood in the yard looking at the barn they'd rebuilt with community help. The sun was setting, painting everything gold and orange. What happens now? Miguel asked. Now we wait for the territorial office to respond to the marshal's inquiry, Ryder said. Could take weeks, could take months. And if Victor appeals? If he finds another judge to buy? Then we fight that too. But each time we fight, we get stronger. Each time he has to go higher up the chain, more people learn what he's really doing. Clara leaned against Ryder, feeling exhausted but not defeated. Do you think he'll actually give up? Ever? Eventually. Men like Victor have other obsessions waiting. Once this gets too expensive or too publicly embarrassing, he'll move on to something else. Ryder put his arm around her shoulders. But even if he doesn't give up, we're not alone in this anymore. That changes everything. They were right about that, though the waiting was brutal. 3 weeks passed with no word from the territorial office. Then 4. Clara and Ryder fell into new routines, working the ranch together, slowly rebuilding their financial stability, learning how to be married in reality instead of just on paper. The town's attitude shifted gradually. Not everyone came around, but enough people did that Clara could walk down Main Street without feeling like a spectacle. Mrs. Hayes remained cool but civil. Sarah Chen became a genuine friend. Hannah Frost started teaching Clara sewing skills during slow afternoons. Judith Marsh's article appeared in the Gazette and was picked up by 2 territorial papers. The response was mixed. Some readers dismissed it as frontier drama. Others expressed outrage at Victor's behavior. Several women wrote letters to Clara thanking her for speaking publicly about abuse. 6 weeks after the confrontation, an official letter arrived from the territorial office. Marshal Garrett delivered it personally, his expression carefully neutral. Ryder opened it while Clara, Miguel, and the marshal watched. He read it twice, his face unreadable, then handed it to Clara. The territorial government had investigated the circumstances of the competency order. They'd found evidence of judicial misconduct, including the donation to the discretionary fund that Judith had documented. The order was being vacated. The judge who'd issued it was being removed from his position pending a fuller inquiry. Furthermore, Clara Whitmore Holloway was officially declared competent, and her marriage to Ryder Holloway was recognized as legal and binding throughout the territory. Victor Hale was barred from filing any further legal actions regarding Clara without extraordinary new evidence. Clara read it 3 times before the words fully sank in. It's over. We won. You won, the marshal corrected. And for what it's worth, I'm glad. What Hale tried to do, that wasn't justice. That was just power being abused. After the marshal left, Clara and Ryder sat on the porch in silence. The relief was so profound it was almost painful. What do we do now? Clara asked finally. We've spent so much time fighting, I don't know what comes after. We live. Ryder took her hand. We run the ranch. We build a life. We figure out what being married actually means when you're not doing it just for survival. That sounds terrifying. Yeah, but maybe the good kind of terrifying. Clara laughed, surprising herself. Is there a good kind? The kind where you're scared because it matters. not because it's dangerous. The kind where you're afraid of failing at something you actually care about, instead of afraid of getting hurt. She looked at him, really looked at him, seeing past the weathered exterior to the man underneath. A man who'd spent 8 years frozen in grief and was slowly thawing. A man who'd protected her, not because he was paid to, but because he chose to. A man who'd become her partner in every way that mattered. "I think I might be falling in love with you," she said quietly. Ryder's expression softened. "I think I might already be there." They sat together as the sun set over their ranch, their home, watching the shadows lengthen across land they'd fought to keep. It wasn't a perfect ending. They still had financial struggles ahead. The ranch still needed work. Some people in town would probably never fully accept them, but they had each other. And they'd proven that was enough. 2 years later, Clara stood in the doorway of the rebuilt barn, watching Ryder teach their daughter how to feed the horses. The little girl was barely 2, all dark curls and serious gray eyes like her father. She scattered feed with intense concentration while Ryder guided her small hands. The ranch had grown in those 2 years. Not dramatically, but steadily. They'd expanded their herd, improved their breeding stock, developed relationships with buyers who appreciated quality over volume. The ledgers showed consistent profit, not wealth, but security. Miguel had brought his wife to live on the property, building a small house near the northern pasture. They were expecting their first child in the spring. Chester Blackwood stopped by regularly, ostensibly to discuss cattle prices, but really just to visit. Sarah and Jack Chen brought their new baby over twice a month. Even Mrs. Hayes had thawed to the point of civil conversation, though she still maintained a certain distance. Victor Hale had disappeared from their lives. Rumor said he'd returned to Boston, married someone else, continued his life as if Clara had never existed. Occasionally, Clara wondered if he remembered her at all, or if she'd just been a temporary obsession that faded when easier targets appeared. She didn't care anymore. That life felt like something that had happened to someone else. Ryder looked up from teaching their daughter and caught Clara's eye. He smiled, a real smile, the kind that transformed his whole face. Clara smiled back. "Come here," he called. "Show Mama how good you're doing." Clara walked over and their daughter immediately grabbed her hand, babbling excitedly about horses and feeding and all the important work she was doing. Ryder put his arm around Clara's waist, and the three of them stood together in the barn they'd rebuilt from ashes. This was the life Clara had chosen. Not the one she'd been offered or the one people expected. Not the cage of Boston society or the performance of proper marriage. Just this. Honest work, genuine partnership, love that had grown slowly from respect and mutual survival. It wasn't the fairy tale people told about marriage. There were still hard days, still arguments about money and work and how to manage the ranch. Still moments when Clara's past trauma surfaced and she needed time alone to breathe through it. Still nights when Ryder woke from nightmares about losing another family. But they'd learned how to be imperfect together. How to support each other without trying to fix each other. How to build something real instead of something that just looked good from the outside. That evening, after their daughter was asleep and the ranch was quiet, Clara and Ryder sat on the porch like they did most nights. The stars were out, scattered across the sky like promise. "You ever regret it?" Ryder asked. "Answering the advertisement? Coming here?" Clara thought about it honestly. "There are easier paths I could have taken, safer choices. But no, I don't regret it. This is the first place I've ever felt like I could breathe. Even with everything that happened, with Victor and the fighting, and especially because of all that, because it proved I could fight for something instead of just running from things. Because it showed me what I was actually capable of when I had someone standing beside me instead of standing over me." Ryder was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I regret how it started. The arrangement, the transaction of it. You deserve better than that." "Maybe, but it gave us both something we needed at the time. You got help with the ranch, I got safety. And somewhere in the middle of that practical arrangement, we found something neither of us was looking for." "What's that?" "Home." The word hung in the air between them, simple but profound. Home wasn't the ranch, though the land mattered. Home wasn't the house, though they'd made it comfortable. Home was the space they'd created together, the partnership, the trust, the slow building of a life that belonged to them. "Yeah," Ryder said finally, "that's exactly what it is." They sat together as the night deepened, two people who'd survived more than most, who'd fought for the right to choose their own lives, who'd proven that sometimes the strongest foundations are built on honesty instead of romance, on respect instead of passion, on choosing each other every day instead of grand gestures. The ranch would continue. Their daughter would grow up learning that strength came in many forms and that choosing your own path mattered more than following the expected one. The town would keep evolving, some people accepting them fully, others maintaining polite distance. And Clara and Ryder would keep doing what they'd been doing since that first dusty afternoon when she stepped off the stagecoach, building something real from broken pieces, proving that you didn't need perfect circumstances to create a good life, just honest effort and someone willing to stand beside you when things got hard. The frontier wasn't gentle. It didn't promise happy endings, but it offered something more valuable, the space to become who you actually were instead of who you were supposed to be. The freedom to fail and rebuild. The chance to discover that love wasn't always what the storybook said it should be, but that the messy, complicated, hard-fought version might actually be better. Clara leaned her head on Ryder's shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing, the warmth of his arm around her. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. "Closer," their daughter murmured in her sleep. The wind moved through the grass like whispered conversation. This was enough, more than enough. This was everything.